controversial either. Right.
Yes. I don't want to be here all day. There he is.
Thank you. Okay, yeah. Carla, you will see you
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? It's 9:04, and I'm going to call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order. We have a quorum present. First item is the consent agenda. The commission may request for a consent agenda item to be moved to the regular agenda for presentation and public comment. Otherwise, the consent agenda will be considered in one vote. All items on the consent agenda have been recommended for approval of staff. No opposition received to date. So the only item on the consent agenda is the minutes from last month's meeting. Anyone wish to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 6-0. We're going to move a couple of items up here to the front because it looks like we've got a lot of folks here for a couple of cases. So the first one I think we're going to tackle is the Fairway Downs annexation. So I'm going to read the discussion item. A, presentation of a proposed annexation of an unaddressed 37.98 acre tract of land located at the southeast corner of Country Club Road and South Ratliff Road. It says for information only, no action required. There's also a related item here, item 2, under subdivision plats, related comprehensive plan amendments and rezonings. City Council has final authority for approval of comprehensive plan amendments and rezonings. Item A, southeast corner of Country Club Road and Ratliff Road, CP 2204, request for approval of an amendment to the comprehensive plan changing certain lands from rural to the neighborhood and commercial future land use being 37.98 acres located at the southeast corner of Country Club Road and South Ratliff Road. And item 2, Z2210, a request for approval of, to zone property to the single-family residential RS1 and general commercial CG zoning districts being 37.98 acres located at the southeast corner of Country Club Road and South Ratliff Road.
All right, thank you, Chair Stribling, Planning Commissioners. Jeff Fisher, Chief Planner. So I'm going to run through the annexation. This is just a discussion item. This will go to City Council in June, but because it's related to the zoning and the comp plan and the annexation initiated this process, we're going to go over that briefly here in a minute. So approximately 38 acres of land. It's at the southeast corner of Ratliff and Country Club. Oh, there we go. So just in that big area there. Y'all had approved the final plat a few months back, and then a preliminary plat before that. So this is basically the first phase in that preliminary plat and mirrors the final plat area. So in order to get to city services, they need to annex into the city. That also requires the zoning and the comp plan amendment. This is in District 1, will be in District 1 in Tommy Hebert's district in the Country Club neighborhood. That's the survey that was provided. So the final plat was for 52 single-family lots and 1 commercial lot. The commercial lot is at the northeast corner, so that needs to be zoned, and then the rest of it will all be for single-family homes. The proposed zoning is RS1 for the single-family homes, and then CG for the commercial lot, and this will mirror the comprehensive plan amendment too. So the RS1 will be neighborhood in the future land use plan, and the CG will be commercial in the future land use. And all that means for the public is that the comp plan is just the future growth, how we want it to grow, and then the underlying zoning will be what really matters for getting building permits and things like that. There is a service plan associated with this annexation. There'll be required utility connections. It's farther away than the minimum distance to connect to city sewer, so they will use septic systems, which they can at half acre, but at some point they will connect onto city water. So here's the timeline. On May 3rd, the annexation petition was accepted by council. Today is just the discussion of the annexation, but you will be voting on the zoning and the comp plan. And then June 7th, all of it together, the 3 applications go to city council for first reading, and then they go to June 21st for second reading consent agenda. But for the public hearing for the council will be on June the 7th. That's actually it for the annexation discussion, if anyone had any questions. So basically, to expedite this process, the zoning and the comprehensive plan will run concurrently. That way, annexation, if it gets approved at council in June, then the comp plan and the zoning would also get approved. And so I can move forward if you'd like. I can finish the presentation on the zoning, or if you have questions.
There's no action required for this portion of the case. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Isn't there more land than is being delineated on that map that's part of this subdivision?
That's correct, part of the preliminary subdivision. So at some point in the future, call this phase 2, this land down here would then have to be annexed in as well and final platted. So the preliminary, which is just the blueprint, was everything, but only this phase is going forward right now.
Okay. On the preliminary plat, was there any commercial frontage or zoning associated with the preliminary plat, or was it all single family?
It did show the commercial lot at that northeast corner.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else have questions? So continue on, please.
Okay. So the comprehensive plan and zoning, we're going to do this as one presentation since it applies to the same land. So I've already talked about the acreage and the location. The future land use amendment. So right now it's rural, so we're basically out in the country, and it's going, in order to annex in and get city services, it's appropriate to then redesignate that land neighborhood, and then that will allow the zoning on the right map to go to RS1 and CG. So that's what they want to do. 9 notices were mailed out for both, none in support. We did get 1 opposition letter I've passed out to you, and it's essentially from the neighbor down that owns the house over here. State law didn't require us to notify everyone, but by putting up the sign and them seeing dirt work being done, we did get several calls on it, and so that neighbor there is opposed to that today, so not within the required notification, but still opposed. These are some of the pictures of the site. This is looking south at the property, east on Country Club Road. You all had approved that plat with that variance. The city just recently completed upgrades to that road. This is east at the subject property looking from Ratliff, and then this is south on Ratliff. So Ratliff will be widened on the east side about 8 feet, which was the requirement of that subdivision plat that you all approved, and that should be able to accommodate some of that additional traffic. Our rationale for the zoning and the comp plan, we do recommend approval of the zoning and the future land use to RS1, single-family lots. They're much larger than what the minimums would be at half acre. They only need to be 5,000 square feet, so they're well above that. Our only concern, and I guess we're recommending a denial with an alternative recommendation, is for the commercial lot. We think CG is a little bit too much for that area. It is a neighborhood, and so we did talk to the owner. They still want CG. We'd like that to go down to CN, with the future land use to be neighborhood center instead of commercial. And again, there's just certain things that, if you look at the CG and the CN, I don't want to get too much into it, but I did prepare these slides in case there are questions. Basically, the CN does not allow any outdoor storage except within 5 feet of the wall, so they can stack things or whatever, but they can't put it all outside. So that'll prevent that. The second thing is the CN limits some of those other uses. So even like storage units could be allowed with a conditional use, but this gives staff at least an opportunity to look at it. Same with like things like car washes and industrial service and warehousing. We don't really want those last few uses I mentioned, probably in a CN district that the CG would allow with a conditional use. So again, that's kind of our rationale. So we are recommending approval of the comp plan and the zoning for the residential to go to neighborhood and RS1, but we alternatively recommend neighborhood center and CN for the commercial lot. Any questions or comments? I know there's probably some people from the public here as well.
Anyone have questions for the staff? Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Sure.
We are going to open it up for public comment. Just by show of hands, could you please raise your hand if you're planning to speak on this case? All right. It's open for public comment. Come on up. If you wish to speak, please state your name and address or single member district.
Good morning, I'm Robert Wicks. You said the address, I'm at 6925 South Ratliff Road, which is the star that was on there. I do have a petition of residents, I don't know who to present that to, of those that represent our neighbors that were concerned about this matter.
Yes, sir.
It's more than just my voice. On behalf of the residents of our neighborhood, thank you for allowing me to speak. Our neighborhood is comprised of families with roots, some 46 years and many over 30 years in that community. They stake claim to this area, cherishing the opportunity to live in a peaceful rural setting that is close to the city. And like the 33 households on this petition, we were disappointed we were not afforded information of this sizable project that's going to change our environment or have our voice heard before the final plat was approved. With that said, our petition addresses three major concerns. In a nutshell, it's traffic and safety, it's the disruption of a tranquil environment and wildlife habitat, and it's the impact on property values and existing conditions. Early in my military career, I learned just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. I believe that it is representative of the proposal that is to transform this calm neighborhood into a bustling area. I appreciate that you've already addressed some of the things such as the commercial zoning. In addition to 120 single-unit homes in a 3/10 of a mile stretch, 120 homes when these two units are going in before you get to that corner in Ratliff Road. And the added traffic associated with permitted commercial development, it makes this area ripe for disaster. You saw the pictures and how narrow that is. And even if you add 8 feet, what does that really do? I also found it unthinkable that a plat was finalized with a main access road teeing off less than 45 feet from my front door. And I ask you to put yourself in my shoes. How would you like that? To know that I woke up that morning and seeing the stakes that were right there. I ask you, is that proper? Not to have input on where that road that's coming out of that area is going to be. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. I love this community, absolutely, and I want nothing more than to see it grow, develop, and blossom. And I know there's a shortage of quality homes and diversity of business is lacking here. Systemic growth is good for the community. However, we've got to consider those that live in the area that is affected by this change. I think that the proposal was riddled with some exceptions that allowed some to prosper at the expense of others. And from my perspective, we foresee unsafe conditions, traffic delays, and the risk of additional death due to accidents. Ratliff Road's already strained by delivery vehicles, tractor trailers supporting the new solar farm, and outside traffic. When you factor the number of additional homes, I question the value of widening a road 8 feet. You mentioned where it'll come from, but how far does that extend? There's many older residents and children living here. One person I talked with said she can't let her kids outside to play because she's afraid of the traffic. pages went instead of one. Sorry about that. Widening the road has its impact, but there's a risky intersection already at Grand Canal and Country Club Road. If you've ever driven there, there's a blind spot. It's right on a bend, and if you put an access road out there or put a convenience area there, it just makes that area all the more dangerous. So, and then you can widen it even further and look at the intersection of 277. 120 homes added to that, the 20 that were developed recently down Country Club Road, it's making it more treacherous. I think sometimes we miss the point of progress. After our combined 55 years of military service, my wife and I chose Ratliff Road because it's a calm and peaceful place. That's been disrupted by this rezoning. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity to present our matters, but I want to just close again asking you to put yourself in our shoes. Would you like to have a steady flow of headlights looking in your living room window? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You had mentioned that, do you mind coming back up? I had a couple of questions for you, I'm sorry. You had mentioned that you had just recently received notice about the subdivision, but not up to this point. Are you in the notification area that the city?
Yes, sir. I'm right across the street from it.
Okay.
The only way we found out about it was my wife looking online.
Okay.
And by the time, and I'm very grateful, Mr. Fisher received an email from me, and he said, but you're too late. It's already approved. The road that dumps out, literally.
Yes.
Look, that's why I put that picture to y'all.
Yes, sir.
In the original design, it wasn't there. And that just added to the ire.
I understand your specific concern with the curb cut. And I'm just shocked that we've had hearings on this case for months. And I'm shocked that not only to see the opposition from the neighborhood, but that you, being in the notification area, are just now coming forward to express your concerns.
Chair Stribling?
Yes, sir.
And also for Mr. Wicks, I wanted to just address that.
Please.
Unfortunately, under state and local ordinance, we're not required to notify for subdivision plats unless there are replats of low-density RS1, RS2 land. So unfortunately, the plat was approved first, which didn't require notification, and then the zoning and the annexation was submitted later. So that's why they didn't know about the plat. And so I think typically what might happen, and it's not a requirement, the zoning often comes first. In this case, the plat was approved first, so there wasn't any notice requirement.
I will point out that there is a condition, though, that the plat assumes a rezoning to RS1. So
Right.
if, for example, you were to deny the rezoning, then that plat could not move forward as is.
Okay. I don't know. I personally have concerns about approving a project with as much opposition as we saw on that petition. And if this hearing today is the first notice that you guys have received, I would say that that's a legitimate concern. And it at least warrants discussion with the neighborhood about the project. And I would hope that if there are major issues like you've indicated with a curb cut that could maybe be adjusted or moved some, I think all of us understand that our city is growing, and this is land that it abuts our current boundary, and so it would be a ripe target for annexation.
Yes.
No matter what it is. But that's just my opinion. I'm not trying to slow a process down any more than necessary, but I think with the opposition that is on that petition, we may be smart to just slow it down a little bit and give the residents in the surrounding area an opportunity to voice their concerns with the developer. So, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Does anyone else wish to speak? If you would, please come forward. Yes.
I would just like to add, very thorough, but I would like to add that.
Ma'am, can you state your name?
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
Suzanne Cole, and we are at 6881 South Ratliff. The fence and the mailbox that you saw where
Yes,
they're proposing widening are ours.
Okay.
We're right across the street from the major part of this first phase of the subdivision. And I would like to add that because that's not public right-of-way in front of our property, the widening would take place for the distance of the land that they have for the subdivision, and then it goes down to a piece of property where it's also owned land, so they would have to come back to the original width, and then past that, they could widen again into their property. So in other words, they're not accomplishing a lot because they're going to go 8 feet and then come back and then 8 feet. So it's not going to be a straight 8 feet.
Yes, ma'am.
Down there. So, and in my view, I can see an alternative because there is actually property currently for sale behind the subdivision. And so if they were to consider that possibility, there's a possibility they could have a road come in that way
Okay.
that would not disturb Ratliff Road at all.
Yes, ma'am.
So.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on this case? Yes, ma'am. Please come forward.
My name is Ruth Dodds, and I live in Country Club Estate Circle, 2072. I'm on the back of that circle right there.
Yes, ma'am.
We have well water, and it concerns me if they're saying, if it does go through, that I wasn't understanding exactly what he said, but something about since you don't have city water there, they could actually drill wells and put in septic tanks?
They're going to install septic systems for the homes that are going in this subdivision because I believe what Jeff had indicated, the sewer lines are too far from this property for them to currently tie into the sewer system. So they want to use city water and septic.
Okay, but is there a possibility that they may be drilling wells there?
I don't believe so.
No, ma'am.
I mean,
I
that's
don't-
written.
Yeah, I think that's the reason
The
for the
size of-
annexation, is to get it.
It's the size of the lot.
Because our water levels are affected on our well already, and I can see that being a huge problem if you're adding this many homes and then you're going to let them drill wells.
Yes, ma'am. I
So
understand
you
your
have to have an
concern.
acre of land to
We
have
have
a
3.5
septic
acres,
and
so.
right. No, I'm saying for a new well water and a septic, you have to have a minimum of 1 acre. These are half-acre lots is what they're proposing. So they wouldn't be allowed to do that.
Okay, but they will still be able to do septic tanks.
Yes, the septic.
Yes.
The other concern is, that I have, is if this gets annexed in, then what's going to stop y'all from annexing us? I've been living out of the city limits for 32 years. I mean, you know.
Ma'am, I can address that, and John or Zach might want to weigh in as well, but the annexation process in Texas has gotten a lot more strict per the state, and so this is what we call a consent annexation, where the owner voluntarily wants to annex into the city and then has to follow those processes, but it's very difficult for cities to try to annex your land without your consent.
Okay. The other concern I had was Brent Badger owned that land for many years, and it had been for sale for a long time, and no one had bought it basically because I'm sure there wasn't water. And so I'm wondering if everyone who had the opportunity to buy that land was made aware of the possibility of it being annexed and therefore getting city water, those kinds of things?
I don't think we can answer that. That would probably be a private matter between real estate transactions, but they would essentially in that area, in our annexation plan, that is considered immediate. Again, all that means is that if a private individual or a landowner wants to annex, not the city doing it, but a private landowner, they would just come in with an application. They don't have to, though, if they were, if they wanted to just hold on to that land. But if they wanted to develop it and connect to city services, then they would have, which is what happened, then they would have to go through that process.
Yeah, but still without notification to the.
I seem to recall at some point when we were discussing this subdivision in the past, that the developer had rights to Miller's View Dual as well.
There's a portion of the property that's subject to the Miller's View Dual. They are actually requesting that the city and Miller's View, or actually the developer, is working to get that all in the city's service area.
Okay.
But if that does not happen, then a portion of it would be served by the city.
Right.
And a portion by Miller's View. But either way, they'll have a public water supply system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Please come forward. State your name and address, your single member district.
Glad I met you out in the hall. My name is Donald Christian, and I live in the Country Club Estate Circle that I have for 46 years. My main concern is Highway 277 and Grand Canal Road. They have put up blinking lights, they put up blinking stop signs, they've done all this. There's been people maimed at that intersection. There's been people killed at that intersection.
Yes, sir.
And you take 48 houses, that's at least 100 cars probably. That's going to add to the traffic to that entire area. So you're going to have to look at a red light, something, if you're going to keep adding to that. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all's time.
Appreciate it.
Good morning. How are y'all?
Good morning.
I'm Glenda Martindale. I live at the front of front of the circle before you turn in the circle on Ratliff Road. And just, the wells, which Ruth mentioned, that's a big problem, with water wells. But you're saying that they cannot do that. As long as that's written in when someone buys it, each lot and block, because if not, then they can drill and then say, oops, I didn't know that. So that's kind of put on the landowners to take care of that. Another concern is, and like Don mentioned on the roads, you have a very small area, they're gonna widen 8 feet. Then, like she said, it's gonna go back to a narrow road. And then you come out again. It's gonna come out again on a curve that's not a good curve. Terry knows about that because she used to live out there. With the solar farm that has gone in, we have a lot of 18-wheelers, and they're not driving 25 miles an hour, 30. They are putting that pedal down, and they're coming off of the, was it 277? I'm terrible with directions. 277, and they're coming around that back loop. It loops around in a U shape, comes in front of our house, makes the curve, and goes down this road. And they are flying. And they're huge trucks because they're carrying all of the solar equipment. We're having a lot of that. And they cannot make that curve. You cannot make that curve and another car make the curve with them. There is just not enough room. So that's an added problem with a lot of traffic. And you're going to get someone killed.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this case?
Good morning, Commission. Casey Pointer, developer, man of the hour, evidently. I would first like to show that, or say that we appreciate the concerns. We have done a lot of planning and working with you guys on this. I would also say that a lot of their concerns are concerns we had probably coming in, but due to ordinance and all of that, primarily the exit there, we had to put that in. The original one, as they said, did not have it, but it didn't meet ordinance, so we had to put that in. Just a few things. Obviously, with the annexation, we are not going to be drilling water wells. They did touch on that. I guess there's a possibility if people buy 2 lots and rezone it so that it's 1 lot down the road, that would be possible for them, but I don't see that happening very often, and they'll already be annexed into the city because that's what we're doing. We're in that process today. Headlights going out, yes, it is facing that house. I've been out there. There is a privacy fence right in front that will block most of that. And for that matter, 80 to 90% of the traffic is not going to go back to South Ratliff Road. It will go to Country Club Road, which is the primary entrance and exit for the subdivision, which was planned all along. Addressing the purchase of land, it was up for public sale. Anybody could have bought that land. They could have done whatever they want with it. The land is in the county. We're here today because obviously we need water, and that method is going to the city and annexing. I do want to address this solar farm as well. I actually live on West Ratliff Road, and I hear what the lady is saying, that it is a lot of traffic from big trucks, a lot, and there's big rocks out there and stuff like that that has no concern. They had no concern for the neighborhood when they did it. But really the point in this is saying that the solar farm was major economic development for our county. I didn't want it. I didn't like it. But it was huge for our schools and other things, just as this is huge for our city and our schools. It's a $250 million economic impact. I know money isn't everything, but it helps. It helps us build better roads, which is what we're doing. We're widening that road. The city, John and Jeff want that, and we want that. I want that. I live out here. I also want increased property values, and they argued that it would decrease. How? I don't see that. You're adding a farm that has, or you're taking away a farm that has a property value of 10 to 15,000 an acre, and adding, 500,000 plus range of houses and lots to that, making it definitely more valuable to live around it. I'm also here to answer questions or comments you guys may have for me.
Casey, the only concern I have that's been raised by the residents and the petition that's been passed is just the lack of notice for the folks in that immediate area. And I've served on this commission for years, and it's been a problem many times. And I've tried every way I know to get better notification on cases. This is another great example of a lack of notification that I think was pretty critical. And I'm not blaming you.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
not blaming the city for the process that we've got, but I don't agree with residents not getting notice about this subdivision until the meeting this morning. I mean, you've come through here 3 or 4 times up to this point.
Yes, sir.
We've heard nothing from the residents. And so, as a planning commission member, I can only assume that notice was sent out to those folks and that they're okay with what's being done. And now we come in the meeting this morning, how many signatures are on that petition? 40? 35?
33.
That's a lot of opposition. And so I'm not up here saying we don't need this project, because I do think that it's hugely beneficial to our community. All I'm saying is, if you've got 35 households around this that are upset about what's being done, at least go through the process of working with them, understand their concerns. You live down in that area, so do they. And they, the issues that have been raised about the width of the roads and the life safety issues are legitimate.
Yep, absolutely.
And so maybe nothing changes and they're happy with what's done after they have an opportunity to get a better understanding. Maybe you move a road a few feet and everyone's happy because of it. I just feel like that's an important part of this process that was overlooked. And that is my main concern sitting up here this morning.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Fortunately, this process is informational, correct, Jeff? We are in an informational stage of this planning and zoning.
Well, the annexation is, but the zoning and the comprehensive plan will require a motion, so that is open to public discussion.
So today we'll have a motion on the
The
RS1
rezoning
zoning.
of the land is what's on
That's
the
right.
agenda this morning.
And hadn't even talked about the commercial, which we wanted to be general commercial, and
Right.
main reason for that is leaving it open and able
Flexibility.
to. Flexibility, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anyone else have questions for Casey?
Jeff,
Thank you.
real quick, what is so we have to have a motion today, or can we come back next month again?
We can table the zoning and the comprehensive plan. That would, since it's on the same timeline as the annexation, we might need to move the annexation back as well, so to give the time,
Yeah,
but
I would say, well, we
I'll let
could
Mike
look
do-
at potentially moving the annexation, but the state law has a pretty specific timeline. It has to be, once the process starts, it has to be completed within a set timeframe. Now, as I'm understanding the concerns, it's not so much about the annexation, but about the zoning. That could be tabled even if the annexation goes forward. Now, Casey may say, well, if we don't get the zoning, we may not want to annex. But we could look at those timelines, but you could definitely table the zoning until your next meeting if that's your choice.
Personally, that's what I'm inclined to do, given the opposition from the residents. At least give them the opportunity to visit with Casey, express their concerns, and maybe alleviate some of their concerns before we move forward with this. Yes. Are there other people that would like to speak before I'm going to leave, Casey, if you don't mind, I'm going to let the rest of the folks speak on public comment, and then,
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Carmen Lira, and I live in the Ratliff area too, in the country club, 1935 Country Club Estate Circle. He did say that if they had got 2 acres, then maybe there would be a possibility for a well. Well, right now, I'm having problems with my well. And I have about 23 pecan trees and mini trees.
Yes, ma'am.
Which I'm going, I don't know what I'm gonna do now, because I can't afford to water them with Millersview water. And at one time, we couldn't get any water or new meters with Millersview water. And the well man came to my place about a month ago, and the wells where they built the new homes, he said a lot of those wells are dry already. So that is a big concern for me.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I have so many trees, I've been there for 30 years. And the concern also is the traffic. And as far as the zoning, the reason I was concerned, because 2 weeks ago, they put 2 little signs, one on Grand Canal and one on Ratliff Road, that the zoning was going to be rezoned, which I question myself every day, what are they going to do? So I thought maybe a town and country, oh, we don't need that here. But those signs were just put about 2 weeks ago,
Okay.
okay?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good
Bill,
morning.
biased resident. I would implore you first, Ratliff Road is it's a real narrow little country road. And I implore each and every one of you that are going to vote to get in your vehicles, drive down that road. And as you're driving, and look over on the left, there's a kind of like a white Austin stone, that's the Duchess's. And then McCluskey's house is right next door. And then look at Mr. Wick's home, which is right there directly across from where they had this planned entrance and exit. And to widen it coming down 8 feet, that'd be great. I mean, that'll help some, but there's still other issues. Where these two homeowners are, you got it's got to be 300 feet plus. So you're going to go that wide, and then this wide, and then wide back out again? I mean, what a stupid looking road. You know? And the accident, I mean, are you going to be that vigilant to be watching you're driving down, and all of a sudden, a car, coming at you? And you got traffic turning in and out? I mean, it's going to create a real dangerous environment. And then, of course, Ms. Cole spoke, and they have the property, the acreage there right there on the corner with the steel fence. Look at that. I have a large truck, and if I'm meeting another, I have a 3/4 ton truck, and if I'm meeting another truck, or just another vehicle, I mean, I got to get over into the grass so I don't hit them.
Right.
Because there's not enough, not enough road there. And then, of course, Miss Cole's place, right there on the corner, their fence line is right on their property line. In order to see traffic coming down Country Club Road, going east, you have to literally get out into the street to see around it.
Yes.
And then the developer, appreciate his comments. He said, well, 80 or 90% of all the traffic is going to turn out on Country Club Road. Well, who's to say 80 or 90% is going to turn out on Ratliff Road? I mean, who knows?
Yes, sir.
And then two, Glenda Martindale, who spoke earlier, she's had, both her girls have had accidents there, and there were pretty ugly ones. And I witnessed some real bad ones there. So that on 277
Yes,
and
sir.
Grand Canal Road. So that's a major concern. Anyway, thank y'all.
Thank you very much.
So Jeff, is this is considered rural right now, ranching rural?
Yeah, the future land uses, future growth plan is rural, and there's no zoning. So the zoning doesn't come in until it's annexed.
So, but what could they do if they didn't put this subdivision? What could they put in there if it's left the way it is?
Well, I mean, if they could get, they're not in the city limits, so they wouldn't have, as long as they don't connect to city services, they could do whatever they want because there's no zoning.
I face this on the north end of town. I live on the north end of town on 2105, and right across, it was farmland for years and years and years. It was nice. But now there's commercial buildings going in there, and so I have to look at that. It's not something good, but that's also the adverse side of that. If we don't put the neighborhood in, they could put in commercial.
Sure. Yeah, there's if you're not in the city limits, you can do what you want. There's no zoning at all. But then you don't get the city services and the police and the fire. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Casey again. I did want to address Grand Canal and 277. It is my understanding that our local and our state are looking at that already. It is a problem. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
And it hopefully will be fixed before too long. I mean, there's another agenda item here that is addressing some of that, and I don't know if it will have to do with 277 and Grand Canal, but I bet it will. Somewhere in that portion of the interstate that we're looking at, it will address that. It'll have to.
Yeah.
Yes, we're adding a bit of traffic, but the problem already exists before we try to do this, so.
Right. Understand?
Thank
I'll
you,
just
sir.
add on to that, TxDOT is in the process of looking at that intersection for new designs. That
Thank
could
goodness.
mean it's next year, it could mean 5 years from now, but they are looking at designs for redesigning that intersection.
Yep.
Thankfully.
Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Okay, anyone else wish to speak? All right, I'm going to close public comment. So we have a motion, or we have the case before us is the rezone of this subdivision. So, I don't know if we want to, yep. So, going back, this is going to be regular agenda item, subdivision plats. Nope, excuse me. Related comprehensive plan amendments and rezonings. So CP 2204 and Z 2210 are the items before us this morning. And I've expressed my concerns about moving forward with this. I'm not looking to unnecessarily delay things, but I think with the opposition that the neighborhood's shown, it might make sense to continue this, at least to our next meeting, to give everybody an opportunity to get a better understanding of the project and maybe a little bit more comfortable with it. But I will take a motion.
I kind of agree with you, but kind of disagree with you, because I also don't think they want commercial buildings in there.
Well, no.
So you lock it in as as residential, RS1, and that's a plus side for them as well. You know, I don't know, maybe work out the details as they go, but I don't know.
And I'll just point out that this will have to go to city council, so even if you move it forward to city council, there will be another public hearing, and there would be an opportunity for the developer to meet with neighbors between the two. Obviously, you can table it, because if you want to hear those answers, or you could basically punt it to city council, because there will be that opportunity as well.
Okay.
I mean, I go back to even on the north end of town, on 2105, and I preach on that because I live there, but even on the same side, right outside the city limits, there's a pipe yard. Until 8 o'clock at night, I can hear them working that pipe in a pipe yard. So residential would be a lot better in my sense, because they can put a pipe yard in there as the way it sits right now, and nobody can do a thing about it because it's ruled. Yeah, I'm just saying that's a lesser of two evils.
Well, it is. I like the idea of a subdivision in this area. I spend a lot of time in that part of town, and Country Club Road and Ratliff Road are not up to the standard that they probably need to be for this many houses to be added. So I am concerned about that. But my greater concern is that we've had 3 or so hearings on this subdivision, and we are just now getting the residents coming in and voicing their concerns about it. I don't agree to the process. I think that they have a right to express their concerns. We have a right to disagree with them, or, but make a decision for what we feel is best for the community. But in this case, with this many folks opposing it, I think it makes sense to at least continue it and give them an opportunity to express their concerns.
So you're trying to table everything, or are you wanting to pass
Annexation first.
Jeff?
Well, just a reminder, the annexation does not take action by you. That was just for your information.
Yeah, this would just be
That
to
only
continue
goes
the
to city
rezoning.
council for action.
The only thing we can
Timeline.
take action on is the rezoning.
The timeline, please.
So, gotcha.
Yep.
That one, okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. John, so today's May the 16th, and we've listened all that. I know it's scheduled already for June 1st for it to go as city council first annexation. Now, according to state laws, how much time is May the 3rd when Mr. Pointer applied for that, or petition accepted by council? I don't know what that means.
That's when the council accepted it.
Okay.
And they applied maybe a few days, a couple of weeks before that. That's when it goes to council, and the council accepts that petition. That's what starts the clock by state statute, where certain things have to happen. You have to have a public hearing later than this date, but before this date. And Jeff may know, he may have it, but I think we might have to go back and look and see if they wanted to, if the rezoning would delay the annexation. We have a window within which that annexation either has to be approved or denied by council.
Yeah.
We'll just have to look at those dates to see if that affects that window.
Yeah, and I think 1 month would work. I'm confident because the timeline was 49 days. They actually requested it to be expedited a bit. So if it moves back 30 days, you're still at 79, and the maximum's 90.
Okay. So we could table it and still be within the time frame.
Our next meeting is June 20th. That's exactly what I was going to say.
So,
I agree with you with the opposition, but I guess I should have asked that earlier, is would you rather leave it the way it is and take the chances? Because let's say they decide to pull it and they don't do it. I mean, They could move all the equipment for the solar farm in there, and there's not a thing you can do about it. By doing this, it's kind of like the short-term rentals. They're held to a higher standard by doing this.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just saying, with moving forward with the RS1, it's gonna be held to a higher standard. It's gonna get annexed in.
Casey, would you feel comfortable if we continued this? Would you feel comfortable if we continued this?
I would rather not.
Right.
Can you speak in the mic?
I'm sorry. An open public comment for Casey to speak.
Thank you. No.
I know it's not what you want to do.
It's been a
but-
long time coming. We redesigned, we did a whole bunch of stuff to make it better, right? And make it more safe and a mountain of things. I would like, I raised my hand because I knew you had closed public comment, but I would like to make a point that the plat is final. It's been approved.
Yes.
So every concern that they have is not whether or not it's residential or commercial, which is the zoning, is what we're talking about. Every concern has to do with the plat. And it's through. I completely and wholeheartedly believe what Joe is saying, that if it's commercial, it's horrible. But if it's denied right here, I mean, I got to do something with it. I can't sit on it. I put it back in farmland. It's not worth that, So something's got to give.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Close public comment.
I mean, I don't know. I agree with the concern of the added households, the
Yes.
added traffic, but also understand fully, because of where I live, of the adverse. If you leave it, because if you leave it rural, it's open
100%.
and it's not in the city limits, they can do whatever, they can move their business over there and
Yes, sir.
make life miserable.
I understand.
So that's just why
I
I keep
understand your
pushing this.
concern.
Maybe they can work with Casey going forward to hash some of the stuff out, but.
He said it's already done.
Well, I'm just saying, it is, but it
We
isn't.
reopened comment or no? Or we closed it?
I'll open up public comment.
Okay. Come on up,
Yes,
Linda.
ma'am.
Go ahead.
Come on up.
I really don't know Casey that well. He lives on the other side of the U-shape. But I will say this, and I'm not being ugly to Casey, but I sell real estate. I see a lot of things happen. I didn't even know this was going on.
Right.
Until the planning, I called Jeff, and he said, the platting's already been done. And I said, how did that get done?
Right.
We knew nothing about it. So, and I know that he wants to do something with the land. He's bought it. He lives out there in our area. He knew the opposition he was going to have. So it's kind of aggravating that nobody bothered, even him who lives in our neighborhood,
To
to
say
let us
anything
know
about
this
it.
was happening.
Yeah.
And to push the platting through.
Right.
He knew he would have opposition. So right there, it's kind of like all of us that have been there for years, we've been there 30 years. And like Bill said, my girls and another girl, and there's lots of kids in Wall that drive that road to school.
Yes, ma'am.
And my girls were in a wreck with another girl. There were 3 of them, and they were hurt.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky they weren't killed. Bill was there and some more that called me, and I went down there. And so it's a dangerous intersection. I know it's on the table to be looked at. It's been on the table for years and still hadn't been done. But it kind of bothers me he would say that, you know, knowing that he lives in the neighborhood and he knows there would be opposition, and he didn't let any of us know.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to close public comment again. So I'll take a motion. Anyone wanting to make a motion here? I think we've done all we can with this.
I'll move that we accept as presented. Just, I mean, and this is strictly to keep it from staying rural and not, them being able to put, because again, they can put whatever they want in there. They can stack metal
Okay, so-
buildings in there and run businesses out
So
of
now
it.
we got to look at this. If we move to approve,
Oh, okay, the commercial.
And is that for CG as well, or CN and neighborhood center? Or commercial and CG?
I don't know about that, just because I would move towards the neighborhoods, the neighborhood commercial, just in the light of keeping things nice.
reduced intensity. Yep.
So I would restate that. The motion is to recommend approval as recommended by staff? Is that
Yes,
correct? Okay.
yes, the way it reads up there.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion. Does anyone wish to second?
I'm going to second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve as the staff's recommended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
Can we get a show of hands who are?
for that, so we.
So opposed?
Document it.
It's 3-3.
4-2.
Did you vote for? Yeah. I voted for. Joe
Yeah,
voted for.
4-2 in favor.
3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us. Or did somebody vote twice?
4-2.
But you voted for. I just wanted to ask you.
You did.
4.
Sam and I are against.
4. Okay, I'm sorry, I was doing it the other way.
Yeah,
So that's not
okay.
that's in favor, but not a supermajority. So 4-2, okay.
4-2. No problem. Okay. Item 2 is going to be this text amendment. City Council has final authority for approval of text amendments. Item A, an amendment to Chapter 12, Planning and Development, Exhibit A, Zoning Ordinance. Amending Section 314, Residential Structure Type, Section 401, Accessory Apartments, and Section 406, Bed and Breakfast Establishments and Short-Term Rentals.
Morning, Commission. Kyle Warren, Planning and Development. And as you said, these are amendments to Chapter 12, Sections 401 and 406 of the zoning ordinance. And what this will do, it'll affect accessory apartments in the RS1 and RS2 zoning districts. And it will also change the separation requirements for short-term rentals applying only to RS zoning districts. And the 401 amendment will allow for an accessory apartment in RS1 zoning, provided the owner lives on site, and that's in either the house or apartment. 2, rental of both units, house and accessory apartment in RS2 zoning, so the owner does not have to live on site to rent both units out, obviously. 3, the prohibition on accessory apartments within 5 years of home construction will be removed. And the Section 406 amendment will remove the 500-foot separation requirement in all zoning districts except for RS single-family districts. 2, allow for more short-term rentals in areas that already allow commercial, multifamily, and hotel development, including downtown. And 3, if a proposed short-term rental is in a commercial district but within 500 feet of a short-term rental in an RS zoning district, both will still be allowed. And our rationale for the Section 401 amendment is that the accessory apartment amendments will legalize the use of many existing accessory apartments in RS1 zoning areas, like the Central or Santa Rita neighborhoods. And this will also allow for a dual rental in RS2 zoned areas, which already allow duplexes. And 2, the Section 406 amendment, the striking of the 500-foot buffer rule for commercially zoned short-term rentals will allow for a higher density of STRs in the Central Business District zoning area and other commercial and multifamily districts. And I know that was a lot. You got any questions on those?
It's quite a bit.
Any particular slide?
Why don't you go back to the beginning?
Okay.
Okay. So you want to allow accessory apartments in RS1 and RS2 zoning districts?
Well, they're already allowed in RS2, but it's just allowing them in RS1 provided the owner lives on site.
Okay, so let's talk about RS2 first.
Yes, sir.
What's allowed in RS2? Can you have accessory structures? Can you have more than?
Yes.
So.
And as it stands now, RS2 allows for accessory apartments, and the owner has to live in the RS2.
Does the owner have to reside in RS2?
Currently in RS2, yes, and the concern we have is you can already put a duplex in RS2.
Right.
So why not, you can have a duplex that's rented out and an owner doesn't have to live on site.
Right.
Why not allow both units, a home and an accessory apartment, both to be rented in RS2 that already allows duplex? So that's that change.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. So John, are you the new requester? Does the owner have to live in one of the units in RS2?
Not in RS2, that we're eliminating that requirement for RS2 only.
But currently, that is the rule.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll point out one of the reasons for this is we have gotten a large number, I say large, we've gotten a handful of cases where folks are requesting to rezone from RS1 to RS2, particularly in Santa Rita, where you've had historically accessory apartments. Well, under our current ordinance, you can't do that. And so in order to reinstate an accessory apartment that's been there for maybe 50 years, they have to rezone to RS2. Now, that creates concerns from the neighbors because RS2 allows duplexes and people don't want that. And so allowing accessory apartments only in RS1 allows those use of those accessory apartments, but doesn't require rezoning to RS2 that then opens it up to duplexes.
Okay.
But again, so then RS1, the owner has to live in one of the two structures.
Correct.
Yes.
So the concern I have about making this change is that if you looked at the zoning for Santa Rita, it's all RS1 with limited exception.
Right.
We don't have RS2 on duplex properties that were built as duplexes.
Not in Santa Rita.
In Santa Rita,
Yeah.
or in other parts.
But
I don't know if
there
that.
are a number of RS2 zones in Santa Rita because of this issue, because the only way to use an accessory apartment is to zone to RS2.
Right.
This allows that opportunity without having to zone it to RS2.
So we have structures that were built as duplexes that are on RS1 zoned land today.
Well, no, they're not built as
Just
duplexes,
as an
and that's a distinction here is because the accessory apartment requires a house and then a much smaller accessory
Well, I
apartment.
understand that, but I'm talking about duplexes in Santa Rita. And we can get in the car and I can show you 5.
Well, I will say
In about
on
2.5
Austin and
minutes.
David Streets, those are completely RS2 zoned on the eastern side of Santa Rita.
There are large swaths of area in our community where we have duplexes that have been constructed that are on RS1 zoned land. We also have a number of illegal, unapproved, unpermitted
Accessory
accessory structures that are being utilized as apartments in Santa Rita and other neighborhoods. And so that's, my first concern is, we're gonna change the rules, but what good does it do if we don't have code enforcement that goes out and actually enforces the rules that we're setting? So why are we changing the rules if no one's following the rules in the first place? That's my first problem. Number two, we're applying this to our entire community. This is really more affected in Santa Rita and older established neighborhoods that don't have deed restrictions or limitations within the development constraints of that neighborhood. Newer neighborhoods have protections that would probably not allow accessory structures to be constructed, even if we pass the changes to the Code of Ordinances. Is that correct?
We don't analyze deed restrictions, and that may very well be true, but that would be amongst that neighborhood in particular. If there's a homeowners association that would say, no, you still can't do that, that's amongst them. But as the city, this would be a citywide change for the zoning.
So,
And this is also something that many other cities have done.
Yes.
Particularly recently, partly to help address housing. There's a lack of housing. This allows for additional housing for college students. One of the reasons I think we see people basically flouting the law is that our ordinance doesn't allow this. Even in a home that was built 60 years ago or 80 years ago in Santa Rita that was built with an accessory apartment, those are no longer legal. So if it goes away, it can't come back. And so people avoid coming in to get those permitted because it's illegal. We think that if we allow this, those people will be able to come back in and do the proper permitting.
okay, so
In order to follow.
here's my greater concern about making a change to RS1. We have, let's talk about Santa Rita because I think it's clearly the most impacted by this change. So you have a 1,200 square foot house that's on a 15,000 square foot lot. What's to prevent someone from going in, purchasing, and building a 900 square foot apartment on the back of that lot and having two residences? That's an RS2 use, and we're allowing a circumvention by letting it remain RS1 zoning. To me, this is a very dangerous and slippery slope that could potentially really harm our neighborhoods by allowing the rental of accessory structures in single family. Personally, I would rather address multi-tenant rental on a case-by-case basis. We have existing improvements within Santa Rita and some of these older neighborhoods that are non-compliant because they're RS1 zoned. They should be zoned RS2. And I think if you look at older established neighborhoods and communities all over the country, you would see a mixture of single-family and two-family uses. I think it's dangerous to allow essentially two-family in our entire area, in our entire single-family neighborhood.
I think part of my answer to that would be that's the point. Now, if you all disagree that that's a good thing or that's too much of a change, that is the trend. It's actually going back to, when Santa Rita was built, that was a common thing to have a garage apartment or an accessory apartment. We got away from that because ordinances like ours prohibited that. And so that wasn't allowed in new neighborhoods, even though it was kind of a traditional thing, how homes were built for decades, if not longer.
So you talked
we're
about
basically going back to that traditional pattern of development.
So you talked about looking at other cities that had faced similar problems. Can you discuss some of those instances and what you saw in the research you did?
The one I'm most familiar with is Abilene. They adopted this about 10 years ago. It was not real controversial. It was for a similar reason, but it did apply citywide. And in my time there, and Zach was there more recently than me, we didn't see an explosion of, that was the concern of some of the neighbors, that there would be this explosion of everyone building accessory apartments. And there was a small uptick, but it wasn't, it was in the tens, not the hundreds or thousands of units.
Okay.
So obviously this is kind of a major change to the way that we've done things in the past. Were there any notices? Does the public know that this is even possibly changing? Like, again, impact.
The notification?
Yeah, the notification issue, which since I've been on the planning board, that has been my number one issue, is I just don't feel like there's proper notification on so many aspects. And again, I know you follow the codes that are put in front of you for the state, but obviously this impacts so many areas in our community, whether it's this case or something else. Who knows about this other than us right now?
Well, that's a good question. On these, it's difficult because it's an ordinance that applies citywide, and we would typically we wouldn't send a notice to everybody zoned RS1, for example.
Yeah.
And so we rely on basically word of mouth. I mean, a number of the folks who have asked us about using accessory units, obviously they are aware of it. And of course, we put it in the newspaper as required. It goes out to the media. But other than that, there's not a huge, we basically follow the statutory requirements for notification.
Okay, you mentioned Abilene in the study. What about Midland, Odessa? What about Lubbock? What about Amarillo? What are those communities doing?
I'm not sure if we have that research. I know it's just in general.
Wichita Falls. I'd like a better understanding
Sure.
of what other, sister type communities are doing. They've got to be feeling the same pressure that we do to build more housing. Every market in Texas is seeing growth right now. We're no exception to it.
Well, and it is, I would argue it's a good alternative to expanding outward too, because when you do bring new subdivisions in on the cusp of town, that adds more infrastructure to the city than that has to take care of. Whereas with this, it's like instant housing that's right there in the center, or in existing homes. So.
Yeah, but you're talking about folks that bought houses in single-family neighborhoods that could now have, double
Right,
the
and
number
that's-
of residences around them. Their expectation when they bought it was not to have a bunch of, twice as many residences around them as we're potentially going to allow if
I
we
would
adopt
point
this.
out, though, that the impact of this is limited. This does require additional parking, so if you can't fit additional parking, you couldn't do this. We do have a lot coverage limitation, so on smaller lots, there literally just wouldn't be room to add an additional accessory apartment.
Well-
Your example is a good one that, if there are areas with the larger lots, a 15,000 square foot lot may be able to do this, but our typical RS1 lots that are 60 by 100, there's just literally not room to put a 900 square foot accessory apartment. So I would say, probably half the city wouldn't be allowed to do this just because they wouldn't be able to fit it or provide the extra parking that would be required.
And going back, there are subdivisions in our city limits. Like I don't think you could probably do this in Southland or Bentwood.
Right.
Restrictions, 'cause they're new.
The deed restrictions.
But like if you.
And we've got Santa Rita doesn't have that protection, and I'm sure there are other neighborhoods like Santa Rita that don't have those protections. That's where you will see the change.
Sure.
You're not going to see it in these areas that are protected already.
Okay, so obviously I understand a lot of your concerns, Travis. Is it something that if this passes, it could be for existing structures that already have a second unit on the back, and then any new build, which, I'm not gonna lie, I can't see unless somebody was gonna use a new structure that they built on their property for personal use. With the build costs right now, they most likely wouldn't be able to make that up in rent, in my opinion, in a lot of those neighborhoods. But would it be something that you could have this applicable to any existing structure that has a garage apartment or
Yes.
agency or whatever, but anything new would have to come in front of planning?
It could. I think the way to do that would probably to make this something like a conditional use. And under our ordinance, something that already exists that's allowed by conditional use is assumed to have that approval. So it would basically grandfather the existing ones. But then it would require that any of these come to you all on an individual basis.
Well, that goes back to what I was saying originally. I'd like a better understanding of what's non-compliant today, so that if we made an adjustment here to the Code of Ordinances, all of that's immediately brought into compliance. And I don't know that all of that should be brought into compliance. A lot of it was unpermitted, and so it doesn't seem fair to me for someone to illegally circumvent the system, add a residence in the back of their property, and then all of a sudden be allowed to do it because of the change that we made to the ordinance.
Well, I would say that if they did that without permits at all, then that would not be, you don't get the benefit of grandfathering if you put in something illegally without permits. It would have had to have been permitted or predate, our ordinances, so it would have to be, 50, 60 years old.
John, I hate to say this, but I think there are a lot of structures that are in non-compliance that were done illegally in our neighborhood.
Sure. I guess I would argue that that is indicative of a need that our ordinances don't meet, and somehow meeting those. Again, the concern is you shouldn't have to, we don't believe you should have to rezone to RS2 just to allow one of these accessory apartments. I can see the
But you
argument.
have to come, you're saying you have to come in and get approval for a special condition. I mean, what's the difference in rezoning and some conditional use? It's the same process. We're going through the same steps. They're coming here according to what you've proposed, regardless.
Well,
Right?
If you go with the conditional use, what we've proposed is just making it allowed by right. Now, I understand
Okay.
your concerns with that.
Okay.
I will say the conditional use is simpler in that it just goes to you all. It doesn't have to go to council like a full rezoning. But I think somehow figuring out a way to allow these accessory apartments to go in without a rezoning to RS2, because again, the neighbors, we just had one a couple months ago, the neighbors are all concerned that they're going to tear it down and put in a duplex, which nobody wants.
Well, I think the concern there was several issues. Number one, you guys had proposed to potentially rezone an entire city block to RS2, which basically we're rezoning entire neighborhoods now with what's proposed here, as opposed to a city block. If you have an entire city block rezoned RS2 and those improvements deteriorate to a point, someone's going to come in and level it and put duplexes on a city block as highest and best use. That doesn't help our neighborhood.
Sure.
An accessory apartment is, that's different than entire city blocks of redevelopment. So I share the same concern.
I think that's the benefit of doing something, whether it's what we've proposed or conditional use. We're hesitant to zone one property different than everything around it. That's why we often look at zoning a little bit larger, because zoning is intended to be in districts. Zoning one individual property doesn't always create problems, but it can create problems. Just zoning one property different from everything else around it. And so that's why some sort of solution that allows these in appropriate locations, but doesn't require full rezoning we think is the solution, whatever that looks like. And I think it sounds like we probably want to table this. We can do some more research, look at some other options, but look at what our peer cities are doing to bring back maybe a range of options to consider.
Okay. I'm really concerned. I think this could be potentially dangerous, and I do want to be careful with the decisions that we make. We've obviously got a lot of folks here, and I'm assuming some of them are going to speak on this case. So, does anyone have more questions for the staff? Yeah, please.
So, and I was not on the planning commission when, and I'm not saying I'm necessarily opposed to this, I just think that it needs more discussion. I was not on the planning commission when the original short-term rental plan came out. John, how was that handled? Was that a community forum? What, and you're just, again, because you're not, Santa Rita is impacted, Pulliam, Coberlin, a lot of that area will be impacted again due to the age of those homes. They didn't have the same restrictions as Southland, Bedford, Bluffs, whatnot. So can you walk me through how you guys, did you open it up to the community and invite everyone in to answer any of these questions? Like, what did you guys do at that point in time? Because that's the only thing I can kind of compare those to.
I don't recall a specific separate, and I just may be misremembering, but there was significant discussion, as you probably recall, but I believe it was all before the Planning Commission and City Council. We didn't hold separate town hall forum kinds of things for that. Okay. And that raises a good point. There are really two things, and we maybe should have just split these as separate items. The short-term rental is basically a cleanup. When we did the short-term rentals, we created this separation because there was a concern of too many short-term rentals going into one small area of a neighborhood.
Yes.
So we said they have to be 500 feet apart. Well, the intent was that that was in neighborhoods. Inadvertently, the way we wrote it, it applied everywhere throughout the city. So now, even in a commercial district where you could have a hotel, you still are limited to short-term rentals 500 feet apart. One of the reasons this is coming now is we've got some short-term rentals that want to go into downtown. We've got two that are very close to each other, but because of the 500-foot separation, they can't. And so, again, we think that was an unintended consequence of the way the ordinance was written. So that second piece of this that we're talking about is just a minor cleanup to clarify that that 500-foot separation only applies in single-family areas, not commercial or multifamily. Because we think if you can have a 200-unit apartment complex, why can't you have two short-term rentals within 500 feet? So
I agree.
I guess I would,
That makes sense.
if you're comfortable with that, I would recommend that you go ahead and approve that piece of this so we can move it on. And then the first piece on accessory apartments, we can table and come back.
Okay.
And I do just want to make one more point on the accessory apartment issue. On David and Austin Streets on the eastern end of Santa Rita, those have been zoned RS2 since 1954. You can drive up and down them. It's still, by and large, single family in nature. There are a few accessory apartments attached to some homes or detached, and there's maybe 2 or 3 duplexes that have been built in that time, but it's still very similar to what's next to it, which is RS1 going west. So just a point to make on that. So thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have questions for the staff? You guys good? I'm going to open it up for public comment. If you wish to speak on this case, please come forward, state your name and address or single member district. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, y'all. My name is Dana Dunnigan, and I live at 422 South Bishop Street. That is directly across the street from the previously proposed block that you wanted to change completely to RS2. My concern with this apartment is, I don't know if it's a workaround by the Planning Commission from the previous issue of trying to rezone that block. In Santa Rita, the people that live there, that buy homes, we don't want to move to the Bluffs. We didn't purchase a home in Bentwood because we like the charm of the neighborhood. There is a certain charm to having a lovely little Sears 1950s clapboard cottage on the same street where there is a lovely, larger, older home. Look at the one on the corner of, Concho and Park. It's beautiful, and we do love it. We love our tree-lined streets, and we love our quiet neighborhood. We didn't move there to live across the street from duplexes. Now you say that won't happen. Maybe it would not, but maybe it would. And this would open the door to what the planning department, I believe, said it is incentivizing the neighborhood. They're trying to create higher density, more families can come in and live in the same areas. Well, we need that. But Santa Rita has that already. We already have an affordable neighborhood. We already are allowed to rent our accessory apartment if we live on the structure. We don't want LLCs to purchase our cottages that have an accessory apartment in the back and be able to rent those to 2 or more families if you put up duplexes. That was our objection to the previous attempt to rezone that entire block. Now, this says, okay, there are already, as I understand it, and I might be wrong because this isn't very clear to me, but as I understand it, this says, okay, there are already apartments there, so let's give them the right to rent to 2 people. Is that what you want to do?
It would just be one in RS1. And some of these apartments have been there since the houses have been built in the late 20s, early 30s, but they're just not in use as an apartment. It would legalize that use in RS1. However, the primary owner would still have to live at the house or the apartment, either one.
I don't know. I believe that, as a resident, I know that when this previous thing, they wanted to rezone the entire block, there was no notice. The signs went in the ground, and I asked my neighbors, I talked.
There was notice. We sent mailers, we put 4 signs
Some
out.
people, I received the notice, but not everyone. I spoke with them.
It was 200 feet, as state law requires,
200.
from the affected area. Those people got
Yes,
notices, yes.
but
ma'am.
they did not receive them. The people who own the house next door to me, which is currently empty, they purchased it for their mother, okay, to rehab it and bring their mother in. She did not receive it. The notice went to the previous owner. At least 5 of the residents that you say, please don't interrupt me, that you say were notified were not. The notices went who knows where to previous owners. They didn't receive them because of the mail. And then the woman who put forth the application, and it is not her fault, went around to all the neighbors in that block and asked them, please, I just want to rent this apartment in my backyard, sign this petition for me and we'll rezone the entire block. That is what she told them. And if you go and knock on any of the doors to the neighbors, that's what they will tell you. We actually had some of the neighbors remove their approval for changing to RS2 when they found out the real issue. So, I'm sorry, that's a regression. I do not agree with changing these ordinances that have been, the ordinances are fine. I think the issue is notification and code enforcement. There is no code enforcement. No. The house across the street from me is a dump. You all know it. And he rents it illegally. The owner does not live there. He rents it to 3 families at once. I have called code enforcement, as have our neighbors, code compliance, I'm sorry, many times because the property is not cared for. We know it is rented illegally. So now you're saying, okay, if there's already an apartment there, you know, they can rent it out to several people. No, it's wrong. There is not enough parking. The streets in Santa Rita are not always wide. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But unless they have parking for 4 or 5 cars, it creates a traffic hazard. The property on the corner of, down at the end of my block on Bishop, and I think it's Conchos, 1 block in, a sign went up for rezoning. I called at least 10 times. The number, want more information for rezoning, goes to voicemail. Twice I got Abilene. I don't know why. And they said the issue is dead. I never did find out, but now there are 9 cars parked around the corner in front of that house. I couldn't even find out what they wanted to rezone it to. It just said zoning change pending. I spoke with one of my neighbors on the corner, and she said, oh, I think they wanted to rezone it to a bed and breakfast, and I don't know if it did, but look at all these cars. Now you can't even drive past that corner. You can't see, you have to ooch out into the street because there's 1 stop sign and no stop sign the other way. So whatever you guys did to that corner, it's bad. You didn't do anything? Okay, well.
I agree. I called code after you got,
Yeah.
tell them about that dilapidated house on the corner.
No, I'm speaking now further down, Concho and,
I can't speak to that. There were no zone changes that went forward anywhere.
there's a sign in the yard now. It's still there.
And what's the address?
Zoning change pending. It's on the corner of 1 block up from Sherwood on Bishop, on the corner, I think it's Concho, on the east, on the northeast corner. It's a little house that sold recently for about $340,000. It's just a residential house. There is no apartment. And Every time you call the number on that sign, zoning change pending, it either goes to Abilene or the call is not returned. It goes to your voicemail. So again, notification. If y'all are going to do things like that in our city, could we at least be notified so that we know what you're planning, which direction the city is planning to go?
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, we know nothing about this sign.
It's your
Yeah.
sign. It's
Well,
in the
if
ground right now.
sometimes people go out and steal the signs while they're up, because they're up all month, and they take them, and they may just end it up there. I mean, there's no zone change going forward anywhere in Santa Rita right
I
now.
want to address the notice requirement because I know a lot of the residents have brought that up, and we really appreciate that. We do, and we want to be more transparent as you know, with COSA. But unfortunately, there's often a gap between when land changes hands and when it gets to the city. And so we do proper notification of everybody that's in our database that we receive, and we're trying to close that gap of when that information comes. So we do meet the requirements, but again, unfortunately, if some of those owners, there's a recent change, we're going to go by the owner of record that we have on file. But we are closing that gap.
That comes from the appraisal district too. Our GIS gets their data, puts it in, and then we pull from there from that database according to that parcel of land.
So could we not have more than 10 or 14 days' notice when some of the people perhaps do not receive in the mail the notice you put up or the sign, which by your own admission may or may not have been stolen or removed? The only way that any of the opposition started was, guess what? I saw one sign, and then several more did go up around the block. But that was 10 days before the proposed rezoning of the entire block, and none of the residents were aware what the change to RS2 would mean.
Yes, ma'am.
Except what, I think her name was Heidi, told them, which was wrong. She did not tell them that duplexes would be allowed. She told them their property tax would not be affected by rezoning. She didn't mention any of the, what could happen. She just said, this is what I want.
We very much understand your concern about the lack of notification.
So the feeling, I'll just tell y'all, the feeling in our neighborhood, and I've talked to probably 200 of the residents. I walked the blocks with some of my neighbors, and we have organized somewhat and plan to do more so that we can keep abreast of the changes that the Planning Commission may wish to make in our neighborhood that we may not be aware of.
Yes,
because
ma'am.
obviously you have a notification issue.
Yes, ma'am.
Obviously. And we feel like we're being assaulted,
Yes.
like our neighborhood is under attack by the city and by the Planning Commission with things like this. Our neighborhood did not know you were proposing these zoning ordinance amendments. Not everybody tunes in to the city channel. Perhaps they're at work, perhaps they don't even have a television. There's a lot of old people in Santa Rita, you know that. So I would just say I am opposed to this, and I think that it needs further study by the city council, and I think that the Planning Commission needs to make the public aware to it by whatever means. Put it in the paper, send out notifications in the mail to the people that live in the areas that these zoning amendments are going to affect. We need some information
Yes, ma'am.
before you vote for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just a couple more things on the notice, and we'll leave it. But we are trying to get our newspaper notification out earlier so that it would advertise for Planning Commission before City Council, so that way the public has that. And also, the state law requires 12 days, and so we always try to get it out within that, and we always do it. It's just sometimes, again, ownership changes or the letters made by the time they get through the U.S. Post might be 10 days. I mean, we can have that broader discussion
Yes.
in the future about moving it up. The concern is if we get too early, then we're overlapping with previous meetings, so maybe there's a balance in between. But we'll definitely look into that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I am that Heidi Brooks. I live at 404 South Park. And before I get started, I'd like a 3-minute time because I do know that that is what is the standard. I sat on P&Z for many years, so please let me know when my time is up. I do not want to usurp everyone's morning. I would like to say that I am not going to regress completely to that rezoning that I was trying to get, because unless you spoke with me, you don't know exactly what I said. I put in an application for one property, and that was mine at, I think that address is 1316 Live Oak, because it has a garage that is not utilized. I have more than enough parking, and I was considering the possibility of converting it into an accessory apartment, as you all call it. At the time, I spoke with Jeff. I did not know at the time, and didn't know until I rescinded that application, that in an RS1, you have to live in the main building to rent the second building. I actually applied for an RS2 2 or 3 years ago. I went around the neighborhood letting everyone know what I was doing so that when it came up, everyone would be completely aware of the fact that I was finishing a conversion that had initially illegally started to a duplex that pretty much already existed. I followed every rule the city said. I put in the firewalls. I did extra parking, everything that I was told to do. I have followed all the city's rules as I have been told. But not everyone in Santa Rita does that. And for some reason, those of us who do it get our hands spanked. The mail situation is a constant problem. I have problem with my mail. The U.S. Postal Service has problems with the mail, and they will tell you that they have problems with the mail. If you own a property and your mail is sent to that property, and you have tenants at that property, because you have rental property, the tenants don't always give you that information. I don't know what the answer is, although we all have single-member district representatives who can and should let people know when there are major changes being made in their area. My single-member District 5, Karen Hesse-Smith, has gone above and beyond to try and notify people when things are happening, and that is what it takes. I'm not saying that she reaches every single person, but she has forwarded texts and emails to let everyone know and asks that people pass it on. I live in this area. I want this area to stay what it is. It's charming. I own small houses in this area. I own bigger houses in this area. But this is a business for me, and I do rent property to people. I don't really understand the living in the main house.
Ms. Brooks, that's been 3 minutes.
Okay.
So you know.
I just
Welcome to continue.
hope you give some thought to this. I don't want across-the-board zoning either. And I'm hoping if you're doing it across the city, we can set up some town hall meetings to discuss it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Please come forward.
My name is Kenneth Wright, and I own property at 1421 South Jackson. Behind that house is a garage, and behind that garage is an efficiency unit of one room, kitchen, and bath. And it was during COVID that I received a visit from one of, I don't know what his position was, but he walked in my office and was telling me about this change that was illegal. That was before COVID. So I came up here and found out what I needed to do and paid my money to be able to have y'all listen to the zone change that I was requested. COVID hit, that was all stopped. But in the meantime, I had done research on what was in MLS and what was sold, what was listed. At that time, pre-COVID, there were 20 plus houses in Santa Rita that had some type of an accessory unit. either above garage apartment, detached apartment, or in my case, a garage with apartment behind it. And there were 8 houses at that time that were either under contract with a similar accessory unit apartment. Now, you know, I'm a little fish in a big pond, but I can tell you that I really don't see the reasoning behind what you're doing, but I think there's a solution to this, and I think the accessory unit is. These houses have been there since before World War II. All zoned RS probably. I haven't looked at the zoning map. I've got access to that, and something probably needs to be done just to bring everything in line. I think the answer would be either to, let me regress. If it's zoned RS1 and it has a house, an apartment, and all that gets destroyed, are you going to allow a permit to rebuild that? Obviously not, because it's zoned RS1. And I'm also an appraiser, and on several reports I get asked, can this property be rebuilt if destroyed? And I have to say, in this particular case, because it's still zoned RS1, I have to say yes, it can. You change that, that will help back up the fact that if it gets destroyed, it can be rebuilt, particularly the older houses where the accessory units exist. So, or the apartments exist. I would be more than happy to pay for an RS2 rezoning on my property. It makes sense. Or it can be easily changed, I think, to an accessory unit, which basically still is RS2. It's, you know, I think you guys have walked into a deep hole here that you don't know exactly how to get out of, and I certainly don't either.
Yep.
But I don't see any reason to really change it, but you have your reasonings, and I'll have to go along with that. But I would opt for a zoning of a RS1 with an accessory unit, or RS2. I'd be happy to pay for it.
Thank you.
But this is probably not the end of it. I would like to see something done and the change made.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Anyone else wish to speak on this? All right, I'm going to close public comment. So John, let's go back. You mentioned that this was really kind of, there are 2 components. We have the accessory structure component and then the short-term rental component. So the short-term rental component would basically put the 500-foot requirement only on single-family RS1.
Well, RS, so RS1, RS2.
All RS.
Yeah, RS3.
Okay. And then separate from that, we have this broader discussion about accessory apartments and RS1 and RS2 zoning districts. So, anyone wish to share their thoughts or make a motion?
I mean, I just feel that the RS1 and RS2 zoning, I mean, that's a pretty big deal that needs to have a little discussion, in my opinion. In my opinion, I would vote to table that discussion until further research is provided from sister cities as well as getting news from the communities and the neighborhoods that it impacts the most. And I personally would go to work on the short-term rental.
Okay.
Those need to be separate, or they need to be the same?
They can, but you could take a separate motion on each.
Would you like to make a motion on the short-term rentals?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to accept as presented on the short-term rental and go to table discussion on the RS1 and RS2 zoning.
Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to table the accessory apartment discussion for RS1 and RS2 and to accept the staff's proposed changes for short-term rentals. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So 6-0. All right. jump back here. Subdivision plats, the Planning Commission has final authority for approval. Appeals may be directed to City Council. FP 2214. Southland Hills, Section 24A. The request for approval of a final plat of Southland Hills, Section 24A being 1.416 acres located southeast of Maplewood Drive and Stone Canyon Trail. Yes, good. Continue. Okay. Want to make sure? I think she just went to the restroom. Go ahead. Yeah, keep going, please.
Okay. Our next cases today are two subdivision plots, 24A and 24B. These were approved back in November of 2021 as one plat. The only reason we're back here today is the developer wanted to split them into two pieces for phasing financial reasons and start with 24A and then go to 24B. So I'm going to whip through this really quick. 24A is 1.416 acres, 24B is 2.172 acres. Zoning remains RM1. So what they've shown us here on the 24B could be for zero lot line homes. They've got the 15-foot setbacks, and then same thing with the other homes. So again, RM1 is a multi-use zoning district that allows single family or zero lot lines. And so based on their platted setbacks, they could go with single or they could go with zero lot line. And actually, I believe based on the lot sizes, correct that it would have to be zero lot line because they're under 50 feet. So 9 lots for 24A, 10 lots for 24B. We've already looked at this before, so no recommendation change. Approval of a final plat for 24A, approval of final plat for 24B. 7 conditions for both. 24A is the tax certificate. Walnut Hill on the drawing doesn't go all the way to the end of the lot, so we just said add just some labeling issues. Add the incremental half of Walnut Hill, show the 15-foot building setback, and then as zero lot lines based on those lot sizes. If you're going to do zero lot lines, show the 4-foot utility easements on each lot on the 10-foot side. So again, that's pretty standard. And then drainage studies, sewer and water mains, Walnut Hill plans and construction or variance. Those roads, they did not request a variance, so those roads will be to city standard. And then note on the plat, fire hydrants and access may be needed. B is almost the same, tax cert, 4-foot easements, drainage study, water and sewer. This one's on Forest Hill, so improve Forest Hill. And again, a note on the plat. Any questions or comments?
No, but before we go forward, I need to read FP 2215 into the record.
Oh, okay.
Southland Hills, Section 24B, a request for approval of the final plat of Southland Hills, Section 24B, being 2.172 acres located southeast of Maplewood Drive and Stone Canyon Trail. So, okay. Does anyone have questions for the staff? All right. Thank you, Jeff. We're going to open it up for public comment.
Good morning, Russell Gully with SKG Engineering. The developer, I guess, wanted to step back and try to split this into 2 of them instead of, I guess they saw an opportunity for the lots on Stone Canyon Trail to be developed quickly, because there already is an existing street there. And so they asked, instead of posting a financial guarantee to cover the entirety of it, they just wanted to split this into 2 sections and run those through. We've been working through designs, pretty much have designs approved on it as 24 in its entirety. So we're going to kind of keep developing and designing under that whole premise. So that's not really a concern. What kind of caught me by or some issues I want to address. On 24A, some of the conditions of approval, it says create a 15-foot front building line and remove the reference to the 20-foot building line. So if you see almost kind of where the red line goes for section 24A, we have a 20-foot building line and utility easement there. We have a utility easement that wide there because there's an existing force main and a water line, And so in order to have room for all those utilities to fit there, we need 20 feet. So to go from 20 feet to 15 feet would not really make sense, so we would ask.
Russell, I wanted to clarify that just to make sure. So you're right, the utility easement is 20 feet, that could stay. I think what we were trying to do was to be helpful for you. It's given the lot sizes are only for zero lot line, and zero lot line allows a 15-foot setback, would be to show you'd have two lines. So you'd keep your utility easement, but you'd also show the 15 feet. If, however, you think your builder is going to meet the 20-foot setback, I mean, I guess that's okay. We usually go with what's the minimum allowed for the use type that's allowed. So knowing that these are probably zero lot line homes, 15 feet would just allow them to build closer and not have to go to ZBA or try to get variances in the future.
Well, we don't want them building over a utility easement. We can't, that engineering will really blow that up, so we can't build houses over a utility easement. So to be consistent and eliminate really any confusion, 20 and 20.
We're okay striking that comment.
Okay, thank you. And then on...
What number was that? I'm sorry.
That was 2B. And then kind of tied to 2A and 6 for Walnut Hill Drive, and it shows just at the very bottom of this image, I'll find it here in a minute. Down here is Walnut Hill Drive, and it extends across. We purposefully did not show right-of-way or any kind of street projection beyond that. There again, to simplify this, and this was kind of similar to what was done with 24 originally. If and when the developer kind of develops the remaining part of that land to the south and to the east, we would develop the entirety of Walnut Hill, both right-of-way and street width at that time. So instead of dedicating half of a street width and building a half of a street that's really used by nobody, our preference would be to, one, either defer that or to just not have that requirement altogether. I didn't really remember this being a requirement when we had Section 24 approved previously, but we would ask to either the option, we don't mind showing the right-of-way on the plat now. If that's a huge issue, we can do that. It's really nothing to that. But at a minimum, we would like to defer the improvement of half of Maplewood until such time as the remaining land to the south and east develops. We just kind of have a goofy half of a street for a lot depth built in there that really would encourage someone to go down there and have to turn around or back up, or just kind of create a strange situation. We plat subdivisions and we leave these, when we go up to a street that could continue on in the future, we've done this a lot. We've done it in Bentwood, it was done in Lucky Lou. They platted lots either side of a street that could continue down. So this isn't really a new concept of leaving, those little gaps and slivers and road segments adjacent to a subdivision kind of not developed and not platted in as part of the right-of-way for that.
Yeah, we're okay with that. The concern we have is that legally, one side of the street is responsible for their half, the other side's responsible for their half. If we don't get it now, or at least do something like a deferral, which we're fine with, then when they go to develop the other side, they could at least theoretically make the argument, well, that's not our obligation. It was the obligation of the other side. And that particularly happens in cases where the developer sells to somebody else and it's a new developer and they're saying, well, you should have gotten that with that phase. It's not our obligation. And so, yeah, some sort of an agreement to defer that is fine.
So then we would ask just for 6 to be deferred until the future development of lands to the south and or east.
So does that obligation go with, is that lot 9?
Well, it would really...
I mean, if lot 9 is sold for a house, who carries it?
The obligation needs to go with the remainder piece of the land, of the real estate, not lot 9, because they're just a homeowner who wants
Well,
to
that's why I'm asking.
live in the house.
I
So
think that's how we would word it. It would be a deferral agreement that the developer would say, I'm not going to do it now, but I'll do the whole thing when I develop the rest of it.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
so it runs with the remainder of the land, doesn't burden 9.
perfect. Thank you.
Yes. And other than that, would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Russell. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment. Anyone want to make a motion?
Sure.
I'll move that we accept as presented, deferring 2A number 6 to future land use or development of the future, and then deferring, or the 2B, the
Striking.
20-foot utility easement.
Yeah, strike the,
Yeah,
so strike
15 foot.
2B
Yep.
and defer
Number 6.
6
Okay.
Second.
under 24A.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Second.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? 6-0. All right. Looks like we're going to skip down to rezonings. City Council has final authority for approval of rezonings. Item A, Z2211 southwest of Old Ballinger Highway and North US Highway 277. Request for approval of rezoning from the Ranch and Estate to the Heavy Manufacturing Zoning District being 20 acres located southwest of Old Ballinger Highway and north of US Highway 277.
All right, thank you. Next case today is a zone change, Z2211. It's going from Ranch and Estate R&E to heavy manufacturing. This is an area where probably a lot of these land stayed as rural for a long time, and then over time it became more industrial. So you can see on the map the future land use. It's entirely industrial. You've got the landfill to the north and heavy industry to the south. There's just a few residential lots left along this street on the south side of Ballinger. And this is, owner had recently purchased 20 acres of the larger piece of land, which continues to go to the east here. So the 20 acres, they will have to do a preliminary plat for all of it and then a final plat on this 20 acres before they can develop. So they're going to start with the zoning first. Future land use, as I said, is industrial, and then the zoning is R&E. 6 notices were mailed out. We did not receive any responses. This is looking south of subject property, and then the adjacent property to the west. There is a home on it. Looks like a manufactured home that is out there. I did get a call from that neighbor to know what was going on. So this is the purpose of the MH zoning. It could allow a lot of different uses. The owner was confident sharing that at this point it would be a concrete batching plant, which is an allowed use in the MH zoning. And so that's what they're intending to do at this point in time. This is looking north. So rationale to approve, the land is designated industrial in the future land use plan. Industrial supports MH zoning standards. The MH zoning requires a 100-foot setback for any development from residential R&E zoning, so that will require any development on that 20 acres to be at least 100 feet from the property to the west that's still R&E. And also they'd have to do a 6-foot tall privacy fence as a minimum. Staff recommends approval of a rezoning from R&E to that should be MH. And again, just the note, they will be required to plat. That includes the remainder of the property and then the final plat of just this 20 acres. And this still needs to go to council next month. Any questions or comments on this one?
Any questions? All right. Thank you, Jeff. Going to open it up for public comment. Anyone wish to speak on this case, please come forward. State your name and address or single member district. All right, I'm going to close public comment. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Jeff was blocking you.
Hello, gentlemen. My name is Hipólito Ramirez. In case you notice, I'm Hispanic, and I wanted to apologize. I live in 7641 Harriet Road, San Angelo, Texas. Okay, I've been in San Angelo for 22 years. I love this community. I want to apologize because we Spanish, we got two sides of our brains. One of us speaks Spanish and the other one speaks English. So when I'm speaking to you guys, you hear tequila, don't worry. It's just my Spanish side, okay? But yeah, I did purchase this 20 acres of land, which was requesting the zoning change in it. We tried to develop an industrial zone over there. We've been trying to get a 911 address for a year, and we've been trying to do everything by the book.
Yes, sir.
We will do everything that the city council will request us to do, pertaining air pollution, air quality, TCQ permits, everything is set up. We don't have a problem with none of that. We're just asking you guys to give us a chance to develop an industrial zone over there.
Yes, sir.
The closest house that we have to our location right now, I believe is probably about 1,500 feet away, which is pretty far away from where we're going to be. And if you guys allow us to do it, you know, we're small business. We've been in San Angelo. I've been in San Angelo for 20 years. My business has been in San Angelo, trucking, and now we're doing this concrete deal. So it's how we asking from the city council, you know, to allow us to keep going,
Yes,
going.
sir.
You know, we're small business, you know, but small business is the backbone of any industrial zone. So that being said, I mean, it's all I can say about, you know, the request that we're doing today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Russell with SKG, and Jeff kind of opened the door on this for us when he started speaking about a preliminary and final plat. We had made application for a final plat on this property, but it was rejected by staff. As he indicated, he bought this 20-acre piece out of a larger 100-acre piece of property some time back, and I guess they told us that we had to do a preliminary plat of the entire, I guess, to include all of the, there's a larger piece here that's kind of owned by the gentleman that they bought their 20-acre piece from. So we're trying to move forward and be compliant with that. We're a little bit frustrated about, they had a consultation, an informal consultation with staff about what do we need to do, and you know, platting was one of those, but it was really never come up that, oh, you got a preliminary plat all of this other land too. So, you know, we were trying to move forward, and we kind of hit this roadblock, and it got rejected. We couldn't even bring it before you for consideration because it wouldn't get through staff, because staff felt like that it had to have a preliminary plat of all of this 100 acres. So we're kind of at a stuck point here of, you know, how do we now go pull in another property owner and preliminary plat their land, this larger 100-acre piece, and it's kind of something we're going to have to work through. We've asked for this to be on the Development Task Force, and even for getting 911 address. I've asked the question at the Development Task Force, 911 address is a life safety issue. Why not issue a 911 address for life safety? They asked for a 911 address for this property. He goes out there and he's clearing brush or doing whatever, and he has a heart attack and calls 911. Where are you? I don't know. The city wouldn't give me a 911 address. You know, so really let's, and I'm getting on the soapbox about this and probably out of line. I apologize, because it's a serious matter. That's somebody's life. Let's give them a 911 address. And I've asked for this to be on the Development Task Force. I've talked about it, and it just kind of keeps asked legal to look into it. I know we're all busy, but let's get somebody a 911 address. If we want to regulate them and control them, let's do that with permitting, not with a life safety issue. So I don't know if you guys have any stroke with staff, but if someone could say, hey, get them a 911 address so something happens out there, we can get emergency vehicles out there. We're not giving them a building permit. We're just getting them an address so we can go find them if something happens out there. So anyway, we'll just kind of keep working through this for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell.
And we appreciate Mr. Gully's concerns as well. We understand that the consultation, there was a discussion about platting, and the unfortunate nuance here is there are times where you have more than 5 acres, maybe you don't have to, but the problem here is they took 20 acres off of the larger piece, but you've got an issue with the road is deficient, Old Ballinger, as well as utility extensions, and so there were triggers for platting. So the preliminary plat would just be, as you know, would just be that blueprint. The final plat would only be for the 20 acres, so there's no requirements on the owner of the preliminary plat other than just to give their consent to include that. They would not be subject to any improvements until, of course, they have to final plat theirs. But that's what triggered the whole discussion on why the plat was required, is because there were improvements that would be triggered, and by doing that illegal split like that and leaving a remainder where there were improvements required the plat. So, but we appreciate the concerns.
Sounds really complicated, Russell. I agree with you. I think it makes sense to put a 911 address on that site.
I'll just note that we do have a development task force meeting next
Yeah.
Wednesday, where that's on the agenda to discuss.
Fantastic. Okay. If anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment.
I'd like to make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 6-0. Plan development, major site plan. Planning Commission has final authority for approval of plan development, major site plans. Appeals may be directed to the City Council. PD 1504, major site plan 120 and 210 East Harris Avenue. Request for approval of a major site plan amendment within the Plan Development Zoning District to allow for new buildings and structures located at 120 and 210 East Harris.
Travis, I'm gonna recuse myself.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead. Joe's recused himself from this case.
Kyle Warren, Planning and Development. As Chair Stribling said, this is PD 1504. It's the 2022 Major Site Plan Amendment. And this is a request for a site plan amendment approval of the Shannon PD. It's in PD zoning, District 3, Harry Thomas, in the downtown neighborhood. And what's outlined in red on this map shows the entire PD as it is. And these are the notifications sent out, 119 mailed, 1 in favor, none in opposition. And on the 1 in favor, they didn't give a reason for it. And these are the proposed amendments, ones for the east-west expansion to their primary hospital on this side over here, and they're adding to the footprint here and over here. And I'll get to the renderings in a second, but and this is the Women's and Children's Hospital expansion, and they're adding up here to the existing hospital there. And those are both on Harris Avenue. And these are the architectural renderings to what is proposed. This is for the primary hospital. As you can see, there's about a 3-car garage and then more, I'd assume, patient rooms and surgeon rooms, that kind of thing. This is on the north side of that rendering across, I believe it's College Avenue there. They have a utility bridge going out to their AC unit there. Also, you can see the continuation of the parking garage. And this is for the Women's and Children's Edition, and I didn't include a picture of what's already existing today, but they're basically just filling in an area right here, making it one solid wall that is kind of indented right now. And I will say on these 3 renderings that you've just seen, they've all gotten DHRC approval last month. This is just the site plan overall approval, or the request for. This one actually has not gotten to the DHRC yet, but this is another part of the East Addition for the primary hospital. And it's just a helipad and more parking garage there, so. And our recommendation is for the commission to approve request for a plan development amendment to PD 1504 with following conditions. The site plan amendment will meet all existing guidelines in PD 1504. Any additions that have not already must meet DHRC approval, as this is located in the downtown design district, and that the applicant obtain all required building permits.
All right, any questions for the staff?
So in these, are we also doing that helipad? Can you go back to that slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this where they currently are and they're just making the parking garage and making that larger?
Yes, ma'am. They're basically elevating it and putting a parking garage underneath it. And that's College Avenue that's going right there, I think.
Yes. So we're approving 3 changes? The women's and children's, the west wing, and the east addition?
Right.
Or just
the
2?
East, well, the east and west to the primary hospital, and
Men and children.
the reason I put the first 3, the primary and then the women's and children's, because those have already been approved by DHRC, and then the east was still part of this ultimately, but it just hasn't been approved by the DHRC yet, so I left it last. But yes, everything, all the renderings here is what's being approved, and these are the footprints to both of them again. Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this case, please come forward, state your name and address or single member district.
Hello. My name's John Bailey at 136 East Tuick. It's just a building right catty corner to the old Central Firehouse. And I don't really have a comment other than, are there any drawings or renderings, and this might not be the right forum for this, but are there any drawings or renderings that I could see what's actually happening?
Close to you?
Close to me. Is that a...
You guys have that on file?
Yes, those would have gone through a similar process and gotten DHRC approval, and we would have those drawings in our office.
It doesn't look like what they're proposing to add in this hearing really impacts you.
No, it is not. So I was just...
But there is
Just
some...
the planning department just across the street.
Okay.
Or not
Across the courtyard.
Across the courtyard.
Just the building directly next door.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Aaron,
Thank you, sir. All right. I'm going to close public comment and hear a motion.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 6-0.
5.
5-0. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Self recused himself. 5-0. Would someone let Mr. Self know that, thank you. All right. Item 5, conditional uses. The Planning Commission has final authority for approval of conditional uses. Appeals may be directed to the City Council. Item A, CU 2208, 5046 Red Oak Lane, a request for approval of a conditional use to allow a bed and breakfast in the single-family residential zoning district located at 5046 Red Oak Lane.
And I do apologize, it says CU 2209, it should be CU 2208. But as Chair Stribling said, it's 5046 Red Oak Drive. And this one was tabled from last month, if you remember, because of issues with their deed restrictions that they had, or that we had actually gotten back from our handouts or mailers. And since that's not a city thing, we can go in and say, hey, we're for it or against the deed restrictions. We let the applicant talk to the surrounding neighbors, gave her time to do that. And I did talk to her on Thursday, and she said she'd only gotten to one person at that point. So as it stands, nothing's been overturned as far as letters in opposition, but just wanted you to know that going forward here. But this is a request for approval of a bed and breakfast conditional use. It's in RS1 zoning in the Larry Miller District, District 6, in the Bonham neighborhood. And these are just images of the proposed house and the street. And here's the notification. There were 23 mailed out, and 11 in opposition, 0 in favor. And like I said earlier, there are about 3/4 of these cited their deed restrictions as the issue for a bed and breakfast. And the rest just had it in opposition with no reasons given. Our rationale for this, because we are still nonetheless going for approval of this case, is that the applicant plans to make no changes in existing structures on the lot. 2 is consistent with zoning ordinance. There are no short-term rentals or bed and breakfast active within 500 feet of this proposed location, and is also a residentially zoned area. Compatible with surrounding area, the bed and breakfast would be an RS1 single-family residential area and will remain residential in nature. Staff does not believe that the bed and breakfast will have any adverse effects on the environment. The area infrastructure is already built to accommodate single-family zoning. Community need, the bed and breakfast will address the need for more rental units in the Bonham, Southwest, and Angelo area. And development patterns, this is a neighborhood, and the bed and breakfast use of the house does not impact the home or its surrounding residents in a negative sense. It's still residential in nature. And there is one thing I did talk with the applicant about on Thursday, which was adding in this third stipulation here that the B&B will be limited to one room of the house, because as she explained to me, and the reason she had to do this in the first place instead of just applying for a typical short-term rental was she wanted to rent out one room for traveling nurses, essentially. And if she did a short-term rental, she'd have to do the entire house, but she still wanted to live there while renting out the room, so this is the process she had to go through. However, for a B&B, if you do get that conditional use, you could rent out all rooms in it, technically, but we've put this stipulation on here, this condition, to just limit it to one room. But other than that, it's the 3 typical conditions that every short-term rental gets: maintain all off-street parking on the premises, maintain the bed and breakfast operation in a manner consistent with the zoning ordinance, including a required renewal after the first year, then every 2 years after, similar to a short-term rental. And we'll need a fire marshal inspection and a building inspection for a change of occupancy.
Okay, any questions for the staff? All right, hearing none, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Anyone wish to speak on this case, please come forward, state your name and address, single member district.
Tony Jones, the developer of said subdivision. I counted for most of the stars on the map in opposition of this. We're currently still building homes in the area. I built Stephen and Robin's house for them. I consider them friends. But the majority of the neighborhood, or all of the neighborhood actually, to my knowledge, has no short-term rentals. I believe Robin and Stephen when they tell me we're just going to rent out a bedroom. We're going to continue to live here. I believe them. However, what happens, I need to know what there's no assurance that Stephen and Robin will continue to live there indefinitely. And I understand that this zoning has to be reapplied for at the end of 1 year. So if the neighbors have issues in this 1 year and call code enforcement to complain, I think we've already heard this morning how far that goes. And so I would assume that to reapply in 1 year would be pretty much a formality. Paperwork.
No, actually, Tony, if I could answer that, it would have to come back to this board or this commission. That's actually why we wrote that into the ordinance, that exact concern. And so that way they have to come back and prove. And if the neighbors show up and say, hey, this has been a problem, then that's a legitimate reason for you guys to deny the renewal for another year. So it does come back to the commission.
Okay, well, that's all fine and well, but if code enforcement hadn't followed up and these guys don't know there's been a problem and these folks that live next door can't show up,
or don't get notice,
we're going to get a rubber. Robin and Stephen will get a rubber stamp, or whoever's living at the home at that time.
Yes, sir.
And so we're adamantly opposed against it. If I wanted to let somebody stay at my house and me rent them a bedroom, I don't think I would have to go through any formal process per se. And so I think that disallowing this zone change would not preclude them from doing what they want to do. And so I'm asking, and there were a number of my buyers here last month when this first came up. It was delayed, so some of them couldn't be here today. Some of them may be here, I'm not sure. But I'm asking that you disapprove this allowance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will say on the renewal, if there's any PD complaints too, noise issues, anything like that, we check that, not just code.
My name's Robin Berry, and I live at 5046 Red Oak Lane. And I just want to say that I would never do anything that would cause property values to decrease, or I wouldn't want to do anything that was against the ordinances or anything. But I am a travel nurse, and when I came to San Angelo, I found there was a need for short-term rental from medical professional housing. And so the idea came that I would rent out a room, and I did the research to see, with the city, to see if there weren't any permits that needed to be required. And so, and I looked at the deed restrictions, and I didn't find any deed restrictions prohibiting me from doing that. So I proceeded to file for a permit, because I wouldn't want to circumvent any of the ordinances. So when I checked with the city planning people, they explained that for rentals longer than 30 days, there's no permit needed. But if I were needing to rent to someone on a shorter term basis, like less than 30 days, that I would need a permit. So that's why I filed. Let's see, so we plan to continue to live in the home, rent out one room to a medical traveling professional. And the only thing that would make me think that we would need a permit, other than following the rules, but is that I didn't know that there was no coding enforcement, but if that's the case, I feel like if a permit were issued, then the neighbors have much more recourse because I'm held to a higher standard. They can, I have to follow all of the permit restrictions of an Airbnb, not an Airbnb, but not even a short-term rental, because those are two different things according to the definition of the city. So it's not really a short-term rental, it would be a bed and breakfast, because that's someone that lives in the home when there's a bed and breakfast. And if I'm issued the permit, then the neighbors have a recourse. They have, coding that they can say, hey, this is not following the permit, and then it wouldn't be reissued. Again, like he said, if I rent out a room for longer than 30 days, there's not a permit that's required. So I would like to say that all of the people in the neighborhood, I just spoke to them most recently this past week. What was I going to say about all the people in the neighborhood? I lost my train of thought. That most of the people that were notified that have stars that opposed them were empty lots. They were not actual houses. And then I did speak to the rest of the neighbors, and they weren't vehemently opposed, but they had already sent in their kind of deed restriction opposing thing. I don't even know how many people responded that weren't empty lots, So my goal would be I know what I was going to say. All the people in the neighborhood bought in that neighborhood because of the deed restrictions, because it maintains the property values, because, Tony has built beautiful neighborhoods that are a legacy to the entire city. And that would not be anything that I would want to either interrupt or disrupt at all. I just wanted to follow the rules.
Okay. Thank you, Robin.
I
So you
just
went-
want to make a comment just real briefly.
Yes, sir.
Because she mentioned, not understanding that we don't have code enforcement. I just don't want anybody walking away from this meeting thinking we don't have code enforcement. There are numerous people, even just last week, that got notices of violation for things. There is a large number of complaints that are coming in right now, and so it's taking a while. But I just don't want people to think they can just do whatever they want because we don't have code enforcement. We do. We have code enforcement officers that are pursuing violations every single day.
Thank you.
Hi, Beverly Lenefeld, and we are in the neighborhood, 5046 Red Oak Lane. And we purchased in this neighborhood because it's a single-family development. And I think an Airbnb is a commercial venture. And this venture brings in unknown occupants, brings in extra traffic in the neighborhood, it brings in extra parking. And I see it as a commercial venture, and we're in a residential neighborhood. So therefore, I ask you to vote no on this. Who she says she's renting, it could be to anyone, really. You don't know who the occupants are.
Right.
And I'd hate for you to set a precedence of having residential neighborhoods and then having people come and go who you don't know who are there. So I'm asking you to vote no on this. And I also speak for the many other families that were here last time that it was tabled because there was so much opposition.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
don't forget about those people.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Yes, sir.
I'm Robert Seckel. I live at 5041 Scarlet Oak Lane. I too am opposed for all the reasons the lady just said right there. We've been there 2 years. We moved in with the idea of it being strictly residential. It's for families. Do not like the idea of a revolving door. I'm like jealous of the lawns across the street from me with the people that live there. They take such good property. I like our yard too, don't get me wrong. But the deal is everybody's got a vested interest in the neighborhood. And when you have a revolving door of people coming in, some of that interest goes down. Okay, maybe it's limited to one room and you're going to say the homeowner's going to take care of all the rest of the stuff. But things change, not necessarily for the better, and those changes always take time. And because of that, I'm truly opposed to it. I just want families to get to know each other. It's been so difficult to do because of COVID. Don't want, again, the revolving door of people coming in to make things like that change. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Does the fire marshal's office typically inspect houses before they?
Not houses, but.
Okay, but in this case.
It looks
they
like
do.
in this instance and in short-term rentals, they would.
So just a general homeowner
Is there
would have
anyone
to
else
have an
that wishes to
inspection.
speak?
Okay.
All right, I'm going to close public comment. You're right. A house, even a long-term rental house, doesn't require an inspection. So the opposition from the neighborhood, and I think the point about the going concern, this is that same kind of slippery slope of how far is too far, and I think there is a very clear distinction in my mind between a bed and breakfast and a short-term rental. And a short-term rental, the owner of the home is not an occupant, and the renter may never see the owner of the home in the time that they use the facility. In this instance, you have a homeowner that stays there and folks that can come and go as they wish, or as would be allowed. I just think it's one step too far, in my opinion, in the middle of a neighborhood. But I'll take anyone else's thoughts or emotion.
Well, just as Joe was saying, so your bed and breakfast and short-term rental are anything less than 30 days. So if you're, renting to someone who's a traveling nurse and they're here for 5 weeks, you don't need permission from the city of San Angelo to rent that room. Just throwing it out there.
The other big distinction I will make is that a rental of less than 30 days requires you to pay a hotel occupancy tax, which is part of why the city is focused on compliance with those rules so that they can track that revenue and collect it. Longer than 30 days does not require the payment of hotel occupancy tax. So just making that clarification. Does anyone wish to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to deny for all the reasons that have been discussed, and obviously the strong opposition from the neighborhood. It goes a long way in my mind.
I second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to deny. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Can we see show of hands on those two votes?
For denial.
So in favor to deny.
Correct. So
Denial, yeah.
To denial, it's 3.
So that is a failure of the motion. So what I would suggest is that somebody in favor of the change make a motion to approve, assuming the vote's the same. Procedurally, that helps us. It's actually a denial because it doesn't receive a majority, but we need to have that vote to approve, if that makes sense.
So I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Aye.
Okay, so by a 3-3 vote, it fails to get a majority, so the motion fails, which is a denial.
Okay.
Okay. CU 2209, 3255 West Loop 306. Request for approval of a conditional use to allow a telecommunication facility with tower and related equipment in the general commercial, heavy commercial zoning district located at 3522 West Loop 306.
All right, thank you, Commission. Our next case today is for a telecommunication tower at 3522 West Loop 306. It's CGCH zoning, so this needs a conditional use. There's the zoning there. 7 notices were mailed out. We did receive 1 in support from the property owner. So my understanding is the TLC Church owns the property, and they're leasing space at that behind the building. I get closer to the pictures, but to allow the telecommunication there, and they would lease that out. I believe it's for Verizon. It is co-locatable. It's a monopole. This is the concept plan, so it's just behind that building, 130 feet tall. There is an existing tower, which looks like it's under 35 feet tall, did not get permitted. This will replace that small tower that if you drive by there now, that you'll see out there. There is another monopole on the opposite side of West Loop 306, directly across the street. That's roughly the same size, and so again, this would be co-locatable. We don't want to have them all over town, but at least in this case, it meets our minimum setbacks and our minimum requirements. So this is the one that would be replaced, and it would essentially be in that same area that you see here.
Jeff, could you go back to that? You can actually see in the background of that picture the other tower.
The other
that's
tower.
across the freeway.
Yes, sir.
Now that fence, I believe, is not there now. That would be superimposed. They would paint it the same color as the roof in front of it, so you can see that. So that'll screen at least the bottom 7 feet of the tower, and we've got that as a condition of approval. We were concerned about the screening, just given that there are apartments behind there, and so the trade-off was we didn't want it in the front because it's so close to the highway and people are driving at high speed. So having it in the back, but right behind the building, not further down towards the apartments, and then having that 7-foot fence. Normally it's just a chain link fence, so by having it solid screened, it'll provide, and painted the same color as the roof, be a little more screening from the apartments there. And then there you can see the tower across the street. If you're looking from the property, there's the existing monopole. So same thing. So this will allow co-location of other wireless providers. And as we've said, it meets all the setbacks, so our rationale is to approve. Staff recommendation is to approve CU 2211 for a telecommunication facility, monopole tower, and related equipment in the CGCH zoning, subject to the 7 conditions of approval. So not more than one telecommunication tower shall be permitted on the subject property, not to exceed a height of 130 feet. The applicant shall obtain a demolition permit for that existing tower before this one goes up. Tower and any associated equipment shall be screened with a minimum of 7-foot tall opaque fence, painted to match either the main building's roof or brick columns. The applicant was very cooperative and has agreed to do that as a condition of approval. Number 4, telecommunication facilities shall comply with all provisions of section 426 of the zoning ordinance, and it does. Petitioner, I'll just go over this quick. She'll indicate the final latitude and longitudinal coordinates. That's standard comment for GIS tracking. Shall be co-locatable, and then she'll submit Form 7460 to the FAA for notice of proposed construction. My understanding, that's just another check that the federal government wants to make sure they know what's going on in the area. We did circulate our airport. Our airport was in favor, provided they submit that 7460 to the government. This concludes staff's presentation. Any questions or comments?
Any questions for the staff? All right, we're going to open it up for public comment. If you wish to speak on this case, please come forward, state your name and address. All right, we're going to close public comment. Anyone?
Make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 6-0. Okay, last item, Master Thoroughfare Plan Amendment. City Council has final authority for approval of Master Thoroughfare Plan amendments. MTP Amendment Interstate Designation, an amendment to the Master Thoroughfare Plan to add the proposed northern alignment of the future interstate highway corridor located north of FM 2105 and connecting from US 87 on the west to US Highway 277 and US Highway 67 on the east.
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. You just kind of read all of that, so I won't repeat it. This is, as you know, you may know, the federal government has designated now actually 2 interstate corridors through San Angelo. Of course, through town, there'll just be one. It's not 2 separate. Through town, it'll be on the same path, but it'll be designated as 2 separate interstates. For most of that interstate, it's along existing highways. So it would just be widening, or in some cases, parts of those highways are already built to interstate corridor standards. This is the piece that will travel new ground, as you can see on the map along the north side. And so that's not currently on our thoroughfare plan. And the importance of the thoroughfare plan not only is to show where new arterials, collectors, freeways will be located in the city, but the most important factor of that is in order to keep that corridor free and open in order to prevent development from going in. If somebody were to come in this corridor with a subdivision plat, that would trigger us working with them. We don't require somebody to dedicate, normally you dedicate the right-of-way for a collector or arterial street. We don't say, gosh, you have to dedicate 200 or 300 feet for an interstate corridor, but it would begin conversations with those property owners to allow TxDOT and Federal Highway Administration to make sure that they can acquire that and that a subdivision doesn't get platted over the top of it. And then all of a sudden, in 5 or 10 years when this is built, then all of a sudden they're having to acquire homes in an area where has long been planned for an interstate. Again, I think I've said most of this. The main reason we're here is that interstate has been designated. This particular route has been selected as the preferred corridor for that interstate. It's still a number of steps that have to happen before anything is actually built. But again, this is helping to preserve that corridor by incorporating it into our master thoroughfare plan. We did send out notifications. This actually is not required by state law. but it's not required by ordinances, but we, as a courtesy, will notify any properties affected by a change to the thoroughfare plan. So you can see there all of the properties that have been notified. Staff does recommend approval of this change. We did get, I think we emailed you an opposition to this, just a single property owner opposed, but it is representing those two tracts as well as this tract here. As you note from the email, the concern was splitting up an existing or an old property that's been in the family for decades. Obviously, as you can see, it doesn't affect that big square right there, but it would split right through the middle of those properties. And that was the concern raised by that property owner. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So what say does the city have in determining the route for the interstate?
Well, only input to TxDOT and the Federal Highway Administration as they select the corridor. So you would not have an ability to move that corridor. Technically you could show a different corridor on our thoroughfare plan, but that really doesn't have any impact on the ultimate decision for the corridor. So again, this is really just trying to reflect what's already been selected through that process. I will say, just for the benefit of folks who may be opposed or wondering what they can do, this is by no means official and it's a done deal. As I understand it, TxDOT would still have public input processes, so this could change at some point in the future before it's completely finalized. But that would be a process through the Texas Department of Transportation and or the Federal Highway Administration.
And so the only major change that we make as a planning commission is by designating this a future corridor, if a property owner that's potentially impacted by this path was looking to develop, they would not be permitted, per se, if the highway had been approved. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't say they wouldn't be permitted to develop, but they would have to develop in such a way that preserves the corridor for that future interstate. Again, they would be compensated for any property that would have to be purchased by TxDOT or the Federal Highway Administration, but it would prevent them from developing within that designated corridor.
Okay.
How did we come up with this idea, this path?
Well, again, basically, TxDOT has gone through a process, and we actually have a map of multiple different routes that they looked at. They're all right through this particular area. In some cases, it's a little further south, a little further north, or how it ties into 277 or how it ties into 67. In some cases is a little bit different. But for the most part, it's this same general area. But they looked at a number of those conceptual corridors, and just based on environmental studies, cost of construction, topography, all of those things they look at. And this is their preferred corridor that they've selected at this point.
I was just going to ask what the distance is from city limits to that.
That's a good question. I don't think we have that on this map. The city limits runs
Part of 2105.
in some cases along 50th, but then in some cases up to 2105. It's all currently outside the city limits, though, I believe.
So it's outside the ETJ and it's outside city limits?
Yeah, let me see if this other map, yeah, actually you can see the city limits there, the dashed line that comes around like that.
Okay.
It kind of jogs around, but.
I guess that's, Travis asked a question on, they'd have to have permission to build stuff. Who enforces that? You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
It's out of our jurisdiction.
The short answer is it's within our extraterritorial jurisdiction, so any subdivision plats would come through us.
Gotcha.
And so it's the splitting up the land into smaller pieces for development where we would, we would catch it.
A homeowner wanted to put up 10 barns in that area, he could do it, if he wasn't replatting.
No, we couldn't stop that, but the concern is more about somebody wanting to put in a 50-home subdivision or something.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. Anyone else have questions? Do we need to open it up for public comment?
I think so.
All right, we're going to open it up for public comment. If you wish to speak, please come forward. State your name and address or single-member district, please.
Didn't bring a slideshow, sorry. This property goes back almost 100 years in my family. I'm opposed to it. I'm in the corner of Red Creek Road and 208. No one here, I guess, is with TxDOT.
Right.
You know, don't know how the property lies. There's some flooding issues that are going to come up if that route is taken. Something that the city planning probably needs to consider is how a bunch of that water is going to come into the city of San Angelo. Because in September of last year, there was a pretty big rain over there on that side of town that did some pretty good flooding around that Armstrong Street area. You know, when the city or when the state says that we don't want to plat that, you are already telling the city that you were going to make my land values less because you guys shouldn't be authorizing a plat. Is that the way I understand that?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Well, I think
I mean, that was something you just brought up.
it would, if somebody wanted to put in a residential subdivision, for example, it would limit what parts of their property they might be able to do that.
Thus diminishing values.
You could look at it that way. I think the other way to look at it is land along a future interstate is going to increase in value, likely exponentially over the next 50 years.
Maybe likely.
And I just want to clarify, I'd asked John when he was presenting what authority we have to move this road, and it's zero. Zero.
Right, and I get that.
What they're asking us to do is to protect this route that the federal government or TxDOT or someone has come up with.
So this is how the process starts, though?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
No, and I understand that, and just formal discussion, you know, and thank you, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your concerns, but I think TxDOT and the state highway or the federal highway folks are probably who you need to be arguing with, not us.
Right. Well, and in this deal, you talked about going on existing roads, but there is no existing road in this section.
No, what I was saying actually is that the rest of the interstate will be along 277 or it'll be along 87. And so it's throughout the rest of town, it will all be on highways that already exist. This is the one piece that would be across new land that's not on a path of an existing highway.
Yeah, you know, and in this, our family has kept this property clean. And now we're subject to this, which ends up being a penalty because we could have gnawed off little pieces. We could put it in a electrical, you know, solar farm of some sort, you know, but electing to keep it clean could now cost us. I'm just asking the city to deny this process.
Okay.
Have one other thing.
Yes, sir.
Not throwing rocks. It's just what I see when I come into San Angelo. I come in today and I come in, get off Houston Hart, right by Oaks, Chadburn. I'm sure that there'll be a exchange right there on 208, an off ramp. The trash that the city has by these off-ramps is unbelievable. I'm beside Highway 67, and I'm fighting the plastic all the time. It takes a community, I get it. You know, how do we fix this problem? That's what's going to happen right there. Thank you.
I understand your concern, sir. Thank you. All right, does anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Yes, sir.
Thank y'all. My name's Gary Alexander. I have the 4731 and the 4732 where it comes along and makes the little jag there. You had a picture earlier, if you want to go back to it. Yeah, the 4731. I border the Lano School property and Highway 208. And I wasn't sure what the letter was representing or anything like that. But years ago, I went and had, well, Russell's not here right now, but they drew up a plan. I was looking at cutting it up for a subdivision. And then they started talking about the highway. And I kind of put that on hold because one of the reasons is water and stuff. But I guess what I'm trying to clarify is, you can't tell me what I can and can't do. That would be up to the federal government and TxDOT, which is the same. Is that correct?
I don't know. No, I don't. Well, I think if...
As far as if I decided to go ahead and go with a subdivision, I understand that I would have to come to the city.
I was going to say, because you're within...
And get my plat approved.
Yes, sir. Because you're within the ETJ...
Right.
You would have there would be some review process probably with the planning department for most, if not all of the development and improvement that you made to that property.
Right. So how far does the city go for their, how far can you go? Countywide?
No. Well, the short answer is state law sets what's called an extraterritorial jurisdiction, or ETJ, which is 3.5 miles from the city limits. Now, we've got an agreement, well, it will go to 5 when we hit 100,000 population officially, although it actually won't, because we have an agreement with the county that pairs that back. So it's not actually quite 3.5 miles. It varies depending on which side of town, but it's up to 3.5 miles, depending on the direction.
Right. But this has been in the works for several years, and like I said, I had it drew up, and then I decided, I'm going to hold on, just see what it goes with, because essentially that's going to bring commercial property along the loop, and we definitely need a different route going through town. I travel Bryant every day, and it's crazy. So I was just trying to get some clearance on, what you actually have over, what I decide to do or whatever.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. All right, anyone else wish to speak on this? All right, I'm going to close public comment. A discussion amongst the commissioners or a motion.
In my opinion, it looks like there's a better way that would be more straight across instead of going through a lot of people's properties to do that. I know that it would be next door to Joe, but, that's the way it is. I need more clarification too on this process. So basically, City Council, it says, has final authority. We're supposed to say, yes, we agree with the master thoroughfare plan, and then City Council goes on from there. But the long and short of it is, none of us here are evidently in control of what happens. If it's
correct.
A text doc.
Really, all we're asking you to do is we're asking the question, should we amend our thoroughfare plan to reflect on it what TxDOT and Federal Highway are telling us the route of this is likely to be? It could change. If it changes, we'll come back to you with an amendment to adjust it. But the only thing that would happen if you denied this would be, it wouldn't be on our maps. That would not change the corridor. That wouldn't change whether or not an interstate goes through that area. It just would change whether or not we reflect it on our plan maps.
If we didn't change it, and one of the property owners that's affected by this potential road were to come in and build a subdivision, would they be allowed to do that?
Yes. And all we would be doing is increasing the cost to the taxpayers of building that interstate
Right.
at that time, because that would be more houses or businesses they would have to buy and
So that's the real
demolish.
impact, is
These basically just puts everyone on notice.
Correct. That's a good way to look at it.
that's exactly what it is.
So, yeah, the real impact though is also when you've had, family land that you've kept and taken care of and been a good caretaker of it forever and ever, and you get to see an interstate come through in your backyard or side yard. That's when we could use Joe's Street.
And I would just say that that is the case with every single interstate that's ever been
Right.
built. And that's an unfortunate side effect.
It's a good reason we don't have one. So, I'm not in favor. I realize that voting against it just means it's not on the map. This will still go to city council because they have final authority for it.
It just wouldn't have our support
Yeah, so
if
I'm
we
all.
voted it down.
Yeah, so I would make a motion to deny it.
I would second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to deny. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed to the denial? Aye.
Aye.
We're 3 and 3 again.
3-3.
I think that
Okay, people.
that works. We'll just take it to city council and note that it was a 3-3 split.
Okay. All right. Public comment, issues or concerns not on the regular agenda may be raised this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the dais. Begin by stating their name and address, single member district. Please limit all remarks to less than 3 minutes. I'm going to open it up for public comment. The only thing I'm going to say here is that the notification of folks that are impacted by these cases continues to be a problem. I don't know how we fix it, but man, is it frustrating. So I just ask that hopefully the city council or someone can help us get a better process for notifying folks, because it's just maddening to me. It's frustrating.
Chair Stribling, for staff and managers too, to look into this more. So one issue is the notification and how the letters get there. I think we're fixing that, or we have fixed a lot of that. The other issue is the length of time in between where we
Yes.
meet. So zoning cases are 12 days right now. We try to get 15, but sometimes it's 12. And then the third issue is just how much notification. So if we
Yes.
meet the minimum standards, I think our concern, until we were told otherwise, is we didn't want to maybe pick one to single out one property or one case and then over notify them, but then not do it for another. So I think whatever we do would have to probably be, I would think would be citywide.
I know the newspaper came up, and that's good, because that's what you need to do, but I haven't read the newspaper in
Yeah, a
years.
lot of people don't read
So,
it.
so
Yeah.
most of the younger generations, it's social media, and I don't know if we do that. Y'all may put it on social media that there is a zone change to this property,
Well, and here's the other thing.
it at least alarms people. It's an idea.
When you're rezoning a tract of land for an apartment development that's at the front of a subdivision, the entire subdivision probably needs to know what's going on, not just the folks within 200 feet of the boundary. And I understand your point of singling a property out, but there are cases that impact far more than the abutting neighbors that we're dealing with, and This subdivision case this morning is a great example. So I don't know how we fix it. I understand the constraints that you're working within. I think we need a better process, is all I'm saying.
And, I mean, I understand too, I think maybe if we don't do it social media wise, that might be something to look at, because that's the avenue of news nowadays, it seems like.
Yeah.
But there's also a certain amount, until it's in your backyard,
That's
outside of mine, nobody cares. And there's a certain amount of that goes on, and I understand that as well.
But whatever the notification is, whether it's 200 feet, 300 feet, whatever, it needs to be that way on every single one. You can't say, oh, I think this is more important for this subdivision, so I'm going to send it out further. We did that several years ago, and that was not good. So it needs to be the same. Whatever that radius is, it needs to be the same on every one. And, with the homeowners talking to each other, I mean, and if you're living in a house that just sold and you got a notification on something that affects your area, chances are, you should ask, because they're brand new. Their address hasn't changed on the county website or anywhere else, so that information that you have is not current. It takes them several weeks, at least, to get those addresses and homeowners' names changed. So it's a big, long drawn-out thing to do.
And to add to that, Terry, I don't know, Jeff and team, if you guys go on the GIS and look around there, or if you actually go on the Tumbling County. But I will say Tumbling County is a lot faster than the GIS. Like, you can look on it, and there's very distinct differences for like months. So.
Well, and if we've got folks going out to take photographs, maybe they can shove a flyer in a mailbox in the notification area or something. I don't.
Well, not in a mailbox, that's a violation of
illegal.
federal law, but.
Okay, tape it to the door or something.
And that's a balance. We can maybe look at some options. I think social media is a good idea. We do put things out on social media. Not every case, typically not a rezoning or something, but we can look at various options. I do want to just say, and I know most people are gone now, but for the record, I just want to make sure everybody understands we are following our ordinance and state law. So
I know that,
and
I'm not blaming you guys for what's happened. I just don't think that it works. I mean, when you have an angry mob in here, and we got a case that we've had 3 hearings on, and they just got wind of it, like that's a problem. And I'm clearly upset about it.
I don't know if it came up earlier in the discussion, but since this is public record anyway, the other unfortunate thing for them was that they were property owners outside the city limits, and so one of the other requirements is it was further discussed not to notify because the ordinance only required them to notify in, and so that's why we put up the extra signs and had tried to be as transparent as we could.
And
so
Terry touched on this, and I think Travis, you and Terry disagreed a little bit because you said if it affects the whole subdivision, notify the whole subdivision.
Right.
Our problem was, where do we draw that line?
How do we get?
Exactly.
And a few years ago, when we did that, city council told us, you only notify people you're legally required to notify, and that's it.
Yeah.
So that's what we've been acting under for 3 or 4 years.
I understand.
And so we're sort of between a rock and a hard place on, we know in some cases, there are people that might want to be notified. That is the reason we put the signs in the ordinance, though, that we at least put a sign on the property. And I guess I would say on most of the controversial cases, the room is full because people became aware of it.
Right.
And so people are getting word of it somehow, whether it's through our notices or not. There's very few cases that we hear after the fact, oh, I would have come, but nobody heard about it and it sailed through. Usually somebody becomes aware of it and lets their neighbors know. And so I think the system works, 9 times out of 10.
I've got a suggestion. This might be silly. It might cause more work for everyone. I'm not 100% sure, but obviously after COVID, we all re-familiarized ourselves with QR codes. I don't know if the city has the ability on some of the notice signs that there is a QR code that takes them right to the city landing page that they can look up whatever the property address is and get the information. Maybe there's an email link that if they're not getting through a phone call or somehow any avenue, I'm not sure about that, that they can email something directly. I just think that there's some things that, they're all tax-paying citizens. We want to make sure everyone in our community is happy be, and so if there's some things that we can do to make it easier for them, that might be a suggestion, so.
Great.
By any chance, do y'all do certified mail? That might catch your attention.
Was the certified mail, was that the question?
Certified letters? Certified
Yeah,
mail?
we do not do that, partly just because of the cost. Instead of a 50 cent, it's like $3 each.
Yeah.
And so, like, we had one case today that was 119 notifications.
Yeah.
I mean, that increases exponentially the cost, and that's one of the reasons. The other reason is we're not required to do that by state law, but I've worked in cities that do that, but it is a substantial cost.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else have anything? All right. Director's report.
I don't have anything. The only thing I was going to bring up was the notifications, but I think we've talked about
I believe
that.
we've covered that. Future meeting agenda and announcements. The next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. on Monday, June 20th, 2022. Adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 6-0. It's 12:08. Thank y'all.
Yes.